All right, so welcome to episode 1 of whatever the hell this is called, possibly Gooncast, depending on if we want to muscle in on other people's territory. I am James, also known as Saber0307, and today I am joined by my other goons, who will also be regulars, hopefully.
Depends how much we like you.
Right,
yeah, is it your name at the bottom of the check?
Yeah.
What check? I'm not getting paid. I thought you were getting paid.
Oh yeah, right. Well, what's up, everybody? I'm Lee Alder, the Valley Jester. I'm also the editor for some of the videos on the Saber channel.
And I'm Cat, just Cat. I guess also the Attack Cat on Twitch, but mostly just occasional co-host for Phasmo / random horror games that we play when we can, because couch co-op doesn't happen anymore.
And suffering with Corpse Party.
Oh, yes.
The point
James,
is, folks,
I had blocked that out of my memory. Thank you very much.
No, if I have
Saber
to live
has
with Corpse Party, you have to live with Corpse Party. God damn it.
Saber has compiled a panel of experts, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about that Justice League thing, which we all suffered through.
Correct.
Lizard versus Monkey, and me subjecting you guys for the last 3 months to Twin Peaks. After trying to get Lee to watch it for 10 years or 11 years, and me trying to get Kat to watch it for like 4 years, I finally won.
Weirdly, I'm most excited to talk about Twin Peaks, despite the fact that that's probably the show I understand the least of the 3 we're talking about right now.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I've rewatched Twin Peaks multiple times, and I still don't understand it.
Yeah, I've only heard for 10 years about how insane and out there and mind-bending it was. And little did I know I was walking into like a daytime soap opera from the early 90s. But as I understand, we'll get around to escaping from the Black Lodge at the end of the episode.
Yeah. So let's start with
Lee. I'm going to end this episode of Doorknob. So I don't know about you, but there's no escape.
There's no escape. There's no escape.
Do we go best to worst, or?
Lee suggested we start with Justice League, and then we end with Twin Peaks because that's the oldest, and that's probably where a lot of people are going to dip because it's not popular.
True.
And I feel like we all collectively enjoyed Godzilla versus Kong, so it acts as that little like spike of hope in the middle of everything, just when it's starting to get to its most grim.
Yeah, for sure.
And strange. So
fuck Steppenwolf. Let's get into this. All right.
The baby-faced motherfucker. All right, so Lee, have you seen the theatrical cut?
Okay, I have not seen the theatrical cut, and I am one of those people, for all transparency's sake, who does prefer Marvel to DC, and who is also part of the flock that believes the only good characters in DC are relegated to Batman and his Rogues Gallery.
Oh, fuck yeah. I mean, I don't...
With a few exceptions.
I was going to say, I don't necessarily agree 100%, but I do agree that those are my favorites. Yeah. Batman and his Rogues Gallery, for sure. A little basic, I guess, but whatever.
I mean, well-written characters are well-written characters. And I mean,
exactly.
You have the Joker as opposed to the baby-faced motherfucker known as Steppenwolf.
Oh my god.
Darkseid getting embodied by humans from the Bronze Age.
Oh well, yeah, we'll get to that shit. So I am only going off of the new Snyder Cut edition. I should say in color as opposed to the black and white. But when I say color, I really just I still just mean beige.
Yeah.
You mean late 2000s HD era Gears of War graphics.
Yes.
And color scheme and palette.
Now, James, did you watch the Whedon cut?
Yeah. I think shortly after it came out on DVD, I rented it off of Amazon Prime. And I haven't rewatched it since. And I did most things that I could to kind of banish it from my memory. along with Batman versus Superman. I've never seen Man of Steel.
Yeah. I saw... I want to say I saw Batman vs. Superman in theaters with my sister. Because this was back when I was living in Baltimore. But I think I also saw Justice League in theaters. The Whedon cut, obviously.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's and yeah, I do remember. I mean, I think I've just hated the DC movies since BVS, but when I saw it with my sister, it was at least kind of like, haha, we can make fun of it. Because I think we went at like 3 a.m. on like a Tuesday or something like that. So it's like nobody was in the theater. So her and I could just sit in the back row and basically riff tracks the whole movie.
Yeah.
Which was glorious and which was basically what we did for the Snyder cut. But yeah, Justice League was just a miserable slog the first time I saw it. I guess I don't know if we want to like give like overall like what we thought initially. But like I remember when we finished the Snyder cut, I remember immediately asking people if they thought it was better, like those of our group who had seen it. And I had just this really weird kind of like balancing act of like, my initial gut reaction was, yes, this was better. But like, was it though?
I will definitely say it's more coherent and it like feels like a complete movie.
Yeah, like ultimately, I think there was a YouTuber who kind of really succinctly, I think it was the Cosmonaut Variety Hour, who he really liked the movie, which I obviously don't agree with, as we're going to come into later. But he said that like he would have really liked an edited version of this, like a 2.5 hour cut of this 4-hour movie. And I think that's really accurate. I think I would have actually enjoyed an edited version of this, like a not necessarily completely true to his vision, but like an edited, succinct, this is the story I want to tell version of this.
Yeah. You mean you want to take a film that has a collective 30 minutes of slow motion footage and whittle that down? That's a really controversial idea.
Well, look,
I know, man. Look,
if you edited it down to 2.5 hours, you might be able to edit out the scene where we realize that Darkseid and Steppenwolf conveniently forgot that.
Oh my God!
Earth was the planet that Darkseid got bodied on.
All right, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way.
I'm shocked that like we've seen only one or two other people comment on what we all kind of saw as a gaping plot hole. I ended up talking about this with somebody else who watched it like a day later, and they were kind of like, I don't know that it was a plot hole, but I think it was just a plot stopped making sense. And I'm like, that's a plot hole. like what do you mean?
No, I did actually see somebody make a post about it on Reddit, which was it was nice to see somebody actually address the issue, and it formed a fairly good discussion. But yeah, the idea that you've got this cosmic warlord, this intergalactic conqueror, the ultimate badass, like they're using the DCEU or DCCU, I guess, to make Darkseid their big flagship villain, which great choice. I give a cosmic lack of fucks about what DC's been doing with their films lately. I've not seen Batman vs Superman. I've not seen Man of Steel. I haven't seen any of it. So with this being my introduction into it, seeing them choose Darkseid as like, all right, we're putting all the chips in. Marvel's got Thanos, and that went great. We're going to have fucking Darkseid. And then to present our intergalactic badass with just this case, I forgot where I was going. I've conquered thousands or perhaps millions of planets and enslaved or destroyed species after species. And the one time he gets his ass whipped by dudes with sticks.
And they very specifically call out that this was the only planet in Wonder Woman's big exposition speech. This was the only planet that turned him away and stopped his extinction.
I don't care if every day, like if every morning I go to a different Starbucks and I get the same thing, I get the same, cup of coffee, whatever. If there's one Starbucks that gives me a bad cup of coffee, you bet your ass I'm going to remember which one it is.
I mean, this
yeah,
was
exactly.
This was 6 years ago now, and I still fucking remember the truck stop diner that I went to in Hopi, Arizona, driving back from Baltimore, that had the worst service and the worst goddamn food I have ever had in my short fucking time on this planet. So
now take that experience and imagine that, she didn't come back to ask if you needed anything when you needed something. No, imagine that she came over to your table and just beat the shit out of you. You're enjoying your eggs and bacon, and she just goes upside your head with the carrying tray, beats your ass with a banana split. I don't know.
And you're like, and James is like, this is of all the diners I've ever been to. I'm was the only one I didn't conquer.
And then forget where it was.
And the thing is, like, even if hypothetically speaking, right? Let's, for the benefit of the doubt, say that somehow they forgot, right? You think they would have remembered it at the start of the fucking movie when they realize the mother boxes are there, because Darkseid lost the fucking mother boxes on the planet that he got his ass kicked.
Where he lost. Yep.
Why is this a revelation like halfway through the movie?
Yeah.
And I've seen people go like, oh, well, he didn't realize the anti-life equation was there. He looked right at it.
Yeah, he literally smashed the ground, and you see those symbols come up. Yeah. And then halfway through the movie, Steppenwolf does the exact same thing. The symbols come up, and he's like, oh, Daddy Darkseid, I found your anti-life equation.
They see the anti-life equation, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, like, they could have done just one little extra. I mean, they added so much other bullshit into this movie. They could have added one little scene of, like, maybe they played a memory trick on him and, like, made him forget, like, casting a spell on him. I mean, like, you've got half of this fight scene being, like, women riding lions shooting lightning out of their asses. And, like, you can't have, like, a sorcerer or something, just like, oh, a little trick of the mind, and he forgot he was ever here.
And they exist in DC. You could have just, like, I mean, we threw Martian Manhunter and a Green Lantern in there. Why not just have magic people? Who cares? Like, the audience will keep up, right? Like, if you expect them to, I remember I had two ideas for how they could have kind of, like, resolved that plot hole a little bit. One was that either they say basically, like, because essentially my big problem with it was that the anti-life equation is treated as a reveal when it's really obvious that, hey, Earth is the place he got his ass kicked. It's also where he lost the mother boxes. It's also where the anti-life equation is. Like, it's just like, that shouldn't have been three reveals. That was really obvious to everyone, except apparently the bad guys. So my thoughts were either they could have done where essentially Darkseid always knew that, or Darkseid, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back and forth on pronouncing his name. He always knew that the anti-life equation was there, and therefore, like, the fetch quest he sent Steppenwolf on was, like, to secure the mother boxes, and then when Steppenwolf finds the anti-life equation, or don't have Steppenwolf find the anti-life equation. Have Darkseid monologue at him and be like, oh, like, you thought I was sending you for these stupid boxes, but there's a bigger prize in store for me when I get there. And then exposition about the anti-life equation. Or two, the fact that the mother boxes are existing on this planet for so long is why the anti-life equation is here. Like, something about the boxes being here forever created the anti-life equation.
Yeah, that could have worked.
I don't know. I feel like both of those would have been better, less contrived ways of upping the stakes. Because we all get that's why they added that anti-life equation bullshit. It's just, and it wasn't ineffective, I don't think, because by the end of this movie, I did feel like the stakes were much higher than the end of the Whedon cut. The Whedon cut was kind of just, oh yeah, we got to stop the mother boxes because a portal will open.
Well,
we don't know what's going to happen after that.
At the very least, the one thing that I can say about the Snyder cut, and it's one of the few positive things I can say about the Snyder cut, is that, like you said, the stakes feel higher, And part of that is just because we have a more complete and compelling and interesting ending. Where, I mean, like, yeah, Superman shows up and we're pretty fucking sure Superman's just gonna fucking body Steppenwolf. But then fucking Flash gets shot and fucking tumbles. And the bad guys win for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And that was like, oh, fuck.
Not just win, they vaporize.
Yeah, and
fucking superheroes.
We got that really cool shot of Flash using his powers to fucking travel back in time. That was cleverly hinted at earlier with
the box reversing, yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is fucking pretty badass. It would have been a little more effective if earlier on in the movie Steppenwolf didn't just keep getting bodied, and like this is the first time Steppenwolf was losing. Yeah, but
the one of the biggest things was that they really didn't like. I mean, Lee, you had mentioned this before with your earlier Marvel comparison, but I want to kind of circle back to that a little bit because one of the biggest things they did really poorly in this version. Actually, I would say in both versions of Whedon's cut and the Snyder cut, they did not set up their villains as threats at all.
No,
every time. I think the one Steppenwolf fight that we were all kind of like, oh, that's awesome. He threw a horse.
That is what got the biggest pop out of any of us for Steppenwolf. Like, he shows up and our first impressions are like, wow, his armor's like really loud.
It's like really busy, and he has
there's a lot going on.
He has this stupid baby face.
He's got his scrunched up little basket case face.
He's got like puppy dog eyes. It's really, but like every other fight he has with the Justice League, even sans Superman, he essentially loses and just gets away. Like it's essentially like they held their own very, very easily against him. And then extenuating circumstances happen and he gets away. He gets off with the box. He gets away with whatever. And then, the first time we see Darkseid, it's him getting destroyed by a bunch of people thousands of years ago that we have almost no connection with.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, I hate to compare, obviously, Marvel and DC, but it's the most obvious comparison. When Thanos first shows up, and I'm not just talking about the little bits of him we've seen seeded throughout, the post-credit scenes and whatever. Obviously all of that has done a lot to introduce his mystique, but it never really introduced him as a threat. It was kind of just like, oh, here's the guy behind the curtain, so to speak.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when we first meet him in Infinity War, he has just killed half of all of the Thor's people and destroys the Hulk single-handedly
in a fist fight
with
murders
no
Loki.
stones
and
murders Loki.
He has
and you're
one
just
stone.
like, oh my god, that is how you establish your villain as a threat. You put him up against somebody who has historically been Hulk, who has historically been the strongest Avenger, just in terms of pure brute strength. And then you say, oh, and through the course of this movie, he's going to get fucking stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
You don't just say oh, this dude is after MacGuffin and he threw a horse once. But every time the superheroes show up, he's going to just run away.
They encounter a very unique problem with Steppenwolf in particular, in that if you're following a traditional 3-act structure, if you're going to have the big, first encounter between the heroes and the villain, which they do in Justice League, it happens about 2 hours into the movie, which is laughable, where they have the fight in the tunnel that eventually gets flooded, and that's Aquaman's big introduction.
Yes.
That's the fight where you're supposed to prove that Steppenwolf is a force to be reckoned with.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Steppenwolf is supposed to beat the Justice League, and Aquaman gives them an escape route, just gets them out.
Mm-hmm.
Not Steppenwolf going, yeah, I got the box, later, nerds.
Yes.
You're supposed to establish right there Steppenwolf is a threat. Now, the issue is that Superman is supposed to re-enter in the 3rd act.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the 3rd act is when they're going to beat Steppenwolf. You then create the issue of presenting Superman as exactly what they don't want the fan base to think of him as. Because Superman has a stigma around him these days of boring, flat, overpowered.
Mm-hmm.
And that all stems from Zack Snyder.
the white meat baby face of DC Universe. And if you follow the traditional 3-act structure, you do work yourself into the problem of if they lose in their first fight because they don't have Superman, it looks like they just lost because they didn't have Superman.
Which is what happens. Which is what happens in the Whedon cut.
Yes, it looks like this team is worthless just because they don't have Superman.
And 100%, that was one of the biggest criticisms of the Whedon cut. It was like these people are still superheroes. They should not need, you know, and yeah, the final fight too is 100%. Whedon had to basically like write Superman out so that the other people could do something, because otherwise he can just 1v1 everybody.
Yes. Like they don't want to create like I always think back to when Birds of Prey was coming out and it wasn't getting enough positive press and they had to fucking rename it to be Harley Quinn, like the movie. Yes. You know, the wonderful emancipation of Harley Quinn and her Birds of Prey. Like, yeah, you don't want to call this, you know, Superman and his Justice League, because actually, I mean, you may as well just go ahead and do that.
I mean,
point. You know, Superman and his magic CG mustache, you know, whatever you want to call it.
I
think which mercifully that is gone in the Snyder cut.
No, give me the mustache cut.
I think a lot of this,
it still exists. You can watch it, buddy.
I think a lot of this, though, just stems from how they wrote themselves into this particular corner. Like, they did, as the second Superman movie, the death of Superman, and it's kind of sort of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. So it's Batman versus Superman with the death of Superman, and nothing has really been properly set up at this point. And at least, like, I'm not super well versed into DC comics or anything like that. Like, most of my stuff with Superman was from the Richard Donner series. I never really, or the Richard Donner movie, I never really watched the animated series, never really read the comics or anything like that. So I also had, for the longest time, this impression of Superman as just being boring and super overpowered and shit like that. And it doesn't help the fact that that's also kind of the way he's presented in the Snyderverse.
Yeah. I mean, it also does depend on how he's written, because there are comics, there are, like, you know, not to exclusively, you know, rag on Zack Snyder, but there are comic book authors too that don't understand how to present Superman.
Sure.
And, like, there's definitely been criticism of comic books that just present him as, you know, boring, flat, flag waving.
Well, Superman was a product of his time. Action Comics #1 was released in 1938. This was an era where people needed a hero, and Superman was exactly what the people needed at that time. But of course, comic books have exploded and turned into this massive multi-billion-dollar medium, and the spirit of the hero does need to be intact, but people want a sense of urgency. People don't want to see Superman show up and completely dominate the screen for 2 hours, or
but, you know,
God forbid, 4 hours.
There have also been a huge number of comics since the 30s that have kind of, like, you know, redefined him over the different comic book ages.
And that's
absolutely and by turning him into a villain.
Well, yes, there's been a lot of that, but also, like, there have been a lot of good ones that really explore the, you know, like, you know, the very idea of his nature, where he is essentially an illegal alien immigrant growing up in America. And then also, you know, this sort of, like, where he does have these godlike powers, but he also has a very human morality. So that kind of stuff is very interesting, but it's not what the Snyderverse wanted to explore.
No,
and they wanted to go big right away, and that is definitely to the detriment of the characters, and definitely to the detriment of this movie.
And that's part of my thing too. Is like I keep hearing, and I've seen some examples from people who've been critical of the Snyderverse bring up of like Superman being interesting, and I see this shit, I'm like, oh wow, this is actually interesting. Like, I guess there was some episode of the animated series where I guess Superman is sort of in this trance coma dreamlike state where he's imagining that he's on Krypton and he has a family and he has a kid.
Yep.
And then he comes to the realization towards the end that this is all fake. And despite this being basically everything he ever wanted, he knows that the right thing to do is to abandon it and go back to his real life. And there's this tearful scene of him saying goodbye to his non-existent son and everything like that. I'm like, that sounds really interesting and fascinating. Or even that one clip that was circulating a few weeks ago from the new Superman series where Superman walks up to a kid and hands him back his hat, and the kid's like, nice suit, and Superman's like, thanks, my mom made it for me, and then flies away. It's like, that's cute and endearing, and I want to see more shit like that, not just, do you bleed?
Superman is at his best when he's not being an action hero. Superman is at his best when he's being heart and soul.
And I didn't, when
100%.
When I first saw Batman versus Superman and I see Henry Cavill, I'm like, wow, he's pretty terrible at this. And then I see Henry Cavill in fucking The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Witcher, and I'm like, he's amazing. He could be a good Superman. It's just he has nothing to work with.
I like, that's probably one of my biggest disappointments is they have the perfect casting, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that like only Cavill could play Superman, because we've had a lot of really good Supermen, but he would be really good if only he was in just a better series. And I am somebody who, full disclosure, did not hate Man of Steel. I found things to enjoy about Man of Steel. I loved the soundtrack. I loved the scene of him learning to fly. I loved Michael Shannon chewing the scenery is always a win in my book.
Yeah, that's I mean,
I'm listing three things, but sorry, James.
I'm just saying, I'm agreeing with you. Like, even without seeing the movie, Michael Shannon chewing the scenery is chef's kiss.
Always amazing. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend his reading of the angry sorority sister email.
Oh man,
it's beautiful. But anyway, like I know I'm only listing three things because there's a lot to hate about Man of Steel as well. But I didn't necessarily just purely outright hate it because the tone was not, because I do enjoy like those questions. I think Zack Snyder maybe gets a little bit too into the he's the Jesus metaphor and the God complex stuff, but actually asking those questions of what would it be like to be, a kid growing up in a small town who is like an alien god, like how does that morality develop and stuff like that. I'll tell you how it doesn't develop by your dad sacrificing himself to a tornado.
That was the stupidest
shit. But that's beside the point. The fact that it was trying to ask these questions and maybe not quite getting there still made me appreciate it. But yeah, then afterwards you have Batman v Superman, that's the second Superman movie, right? There's no other. Yeah,
there's nothing else.
That's too much for me. You have to. I mean, I have been also rewatching, and not to continuously compare it, but it is the two big head honchos. So I was rewatching the Iron Man movies, 1, 2, and 3, right? Which are not the greatest movies ever made, but they're really competent and compelling in setting up kind of who this character is and how he grows before we see him in a big old team up. Because Iron Man 1 and 2 come before I think everything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Other than the Hulk movies and the stuff before, but Iron Man
Captain
is Captain
Marvel,
but Iron Man's the first official movie start.
Yeah, it went Iron Man, MCU. Hulk, and then Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
I would go as far as to say the first Iron Man movie is revolutionary.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that I feel like one of the things Marvel did really, and maybe they had kind of a bit of an advantage because, and I'm not entirely sure about this because I'm not super up on Marvel comics. But as far as I'm aware, Iron Man was not a big name or a big draw, at least.
He was not
before the MCU happened. Before that. It was Spider-Man and Wolverine, right?
Yeah, everything I've heard was basically, even though like Iron Man and Captain America are kind of like central to the Avengers, everything I've heard from like for example on Cosmonaut Marcus's channel, because he's big into comics and shit like that, is they were kind of like the less popular semi B tier heroes. Not necessarily saying the qualities of their stories were bad or anything like that. It's just they weren't nearly as iconic or as popular as like Wolverine and Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Or even Hulk, because Hulk had that 70s series or 80s series.
And so I think when you look at it that way and you compare, you know, like Superman has already had many movies done about him, right? Yeah. So telling a Superman origin story that's not the same as the previous ones, you know, like is not necessarily like it's something you want to do, but also, you don't necessarily want to retread the ground that like Christopher Reeves already walked and stuff like that, right? But like at the same time, you want something like the audience wants something familiar. They want Superman. They want the Superman they know, or at least they want an interpretation of him that they can recognize today as what they know. You know, whether that's like, you know, that like we don't, again, like you said, it's a totally different time. We don't need 30s Superman, but like we need something related to that. Now, when you look at Iron Man, they could have taken him however they wanted, because there's not really that big of a fan base for Iron Man, right? Like there's not legions of movies and, you know, media about Iron Man. Superman is iconic not just to the DC universe, but just to superheroes in general. Like he's probably the first image you think of, right? So it's like that's something where like you can mess it up hard. And
I believe the Richard Donner Superman movie was the first live action theatrical film outside of like shorts and everything like that. And outside of the Adam West Batman movie, which was, you know, was just a spinoff of the TV show. But like the first big one, and then immediately followed by, or not immediately, but like about 10 years later, Tim Burton's Batman. And it's like, those are like the two big things.
Yeah. Sorry, Lee, you were saying something.
No, it's like, I was just gonna chip in that, you know, at least speaking for Iron Man, the comics had a lot of material in them that the Marvel Cinematic Universe didn't shy away from. And again, I'm not a big DC fan, so, you know, outside of a couple Superman stories I can think of that come to mind, I don't know the deep catalog well enough. But I mean, Iron Man presented a lot of interesting, borderline controversial issues in its pages. Like an entire arc where Tony's crippling alcoholism and depression kicks in, and he can't be Iron Man to start saving the city because he's miserable. I think there was some kind of issue with, like, I think one of the Avengers died, or there was some issue with Pepper, and they translated parts of that storyline into Iron Man 3.
And I think that's one of the MCU's biggest strengths, is that they have kind of a wealth of, like, they have a whole catalog of stories that are, you know, like they can pick from like the best of them, right? And there's a lot to choose from, but you can kind of take it and reinterpret it and recontextualize it without too much backlash. Because I know people had backlash against the Mandarin reveal, and I know people have had backlash against various other things in the MCU that they've altered from the comics, but not to the level of the Man of Steel backlash. You know, the Man of Steel backlash was like, you screwed up Superman, and, you know, that's just, which I frankly don't agree with, but I do wish that for the sake of this Snyder cut, which, circling all the way back, for the sake of this movie, I do kind of wish that was a little bit more intact, that maybe we did have a little bit less of the interesting philosophical questions that I liked about Man of Steel, and a little bit more of that like homegrown farm boy optimistic Superman, so we could, you know, have some sort of point of reference for what's happening here, right? Where it's just like,
no, go on.
No, just that they kind of just want to have the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe cake in one go, and that's just functionally impossible. It took them like 4 phases, right, or whatever they're at now. They're at phase 4, I think, right?
Phase 4 kicked off with WandaVision.
Yeah, you can't do 3 phases worth of content in 3 movies, even if they're 4 hours long each. You just can't do it.
Can we also?
I'm a simple man. I want the Superman movie that was written by Kevin Smith and done with John Peters producing, where he fights a giant spider. I want that.
Is that the Nick Cage one? Or
Yes.
Yeah, that's the
Fuck yes.
Give me that shit.
Yeah, and that's
Extra
also
on board.
That's also the reason why there's a giant spider in Wild Wild West, is because it was the same producer.
Oh.
He finally got his giant spider.
Oh, yeah. Good for him.
But can we also...
He deserves it.
He deserves it.
Can we also just briefly talk about how Bruce Wayne let the Martha Kent become homeless?
Oh my god, yes.
You could have easily just stepped in. And it's like, I'm not gonna do this until Superman's alive and we've saved the day.
What an asshole!
At literally any point, he could have been like, "Wait, I'm a billionaire."
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
I've got to follow my code.
All right. So I want to move on to brighter things, but just final verdict on Snyder cut.
I think the good that comes out of this movie is that we did actually finally get to see the director's real vision without studio interference. Yeah. And my hope is not that this will lead to necessarily more Snyderverse, even though I would not be opposed to seeing more, given that we did get, we got extended Cyborg, we got extended Flash, which I know you guys didn't really like the Flash that much, but other than that first scene with him, I kind of dug him a little bit more, definitely more than the Whedon version.
I don't even remember him from the Whedon version.
He was just all one-liners basically. But more so than like encouraging directors to do like longer cuts, which is what a lot of the hot takes I've been seeing online, which I'm like, no, we don't need a 6-hour end game. We don't need, just stop that, please. But more so than that, I hope it encourages studios to at least bend a little bit more and listen to their creative team, just because I do feel like at the core of this movie is a better movie than the Whedon cut. And that's not necessarily to totally shit on Whedon either, even though yeah, fuck that. But like it's mostly just like how, like the fact that the Warner Brothers executives got cold feet on Snyder's version and then kind of used a personal tragedy in his life to muscle him out of the production, to then kind of like mess it up by trying to just make it Avengers. I'm hoping that this is a lesson learned for them for them, but that when you listen to your creative team, you can actually get good things. And clearly, as even though we didn't necessarily love the movie, I didn't love the movie. I know you guys will say your piece soon. Even though we didn't love the movie, I feel like enough people did and enjoyed it, and it's got enough of a high score on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm hoping that bodes well for future products or future creative projects for people, so we don't get a bunch of execs pushing people out.
Yeah,
that's my takeaway. Is I didn't love the movie. I am hopeful for what it means for future projects.
I think that, again, with no experience with anything else in the DC film universe, I'm looking at this purely as the movie that I sat down and watched.
Mm-hmm.
If you cut, I'll even be generous. I'll let you only cut like 40 minutes. If you just cut out 40 minutes, the film really has something. It does. It's mired down by wanting to wedge in all the things that I think had to be pushed in when it was clear a second movie wasn't going to happen. I think that there's 2 movies worth of material that Zack Snyder wanted to just get out there. The post-apocalyptic scene with Batman teaming up with Deathstroke the Terminator, and like half of the cast being dead, and I'm not going to go with the low-hanging fruit and start talking about Jared Leto's Joker.
You don't want to talk about the reach around?
No, I think maybe the most controversial thing I'll say is that I don't hate Leto's Joker.
All right, that's the end of the podcast. This is what we're happening
later, folks. I think he was.
Wait. Sorry to interrupt, but did you see Suicide Squad?
Yes.
Okay. All right, continue.
Because I do notice a bit of a difference in the way that he did his Joker between those two movies.
Gotcha.
I think his gangster mafioso Joker in Suicide Squad was a visual abortion. I hated every moment of it. Mm-hmm. He started trying to make some character changes in this little epilogue that I noticed and that were appreciated. He's still by far possibly the worst big screen Joker, but I think people rag on it a bit too much. The movie tried to wedge too much into one cut, split it into two movies, and it's fine, or just cut out 40 minutes and make the best of it you can. It could have been a whole hell of a lot worse. The soundtrack slaps. Ancient Amazonian lamentation music for days.
Horn wailing.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And if it allows the DC universe to start to revisit some other ideas and maybe keep things rolling, that would be cool. If the Snyder Cut does its job of making more movies like it accessible, then awesome.
Yeah.
But overall, it's just bloated.
Yes. I basically completely agree with everything you said, except I still don't. I appreciate you giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm still not a Leto fan.
Yeah.
Look, Jared Leto, I'm over him. He can go back to his like sex cult island or whatever he was doing. Or, back when he was a musician, who remembers that?
Yeah,
remember when he was a good actor in Requiem for a Dream and other early stuff?
Fight Club? Yeah.
I fucking love him in Lord of War.
Yeah.
I really dig him in Alexander.
He was really good in he was pretty good in the Jodie Foster.
Oh, Panic Room.
Kristen Stewart. Yeah, thank you. Panic Room. I liked him in Panic Room.
Remember when he was in that sequel to Blade Runner that never happened?
No.
I love Blade Runner 2049. Fuck you. And you did too. I thought you liked Blade Runner 2049.
Wait. Oh my god, I totally forgot he was like the Mark Zuckerberg in that, right?
Yeah.
He's robot god.
Yeah. Oh my god, that's right. He was. Oh man, that you know what? I completely conflate him and the guy they put into Detroit because it's the same character.
Oh yeah,
the exact same character.
It's the same character.
No,
I think they want to do that. And, and the guy from that one Black Mirror episode where oh my god, Andrew Scott is like, I hope I didn't get those names mixed up. He's like his wife died in a car crash or something, and so he like takes a guy hostage.
I've never seen Black Mirror, so I don't know.
Oh, spoiler alert! I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, I haven't.
But there's an episode where he's like trying to get a hold of a tech CEO, and the tech CEO is exactly that Jared Leto like archetype of like the hippie, shaggy haired tech genius bro, just like slumming with a bunch of robot prostitutes and whatever.
Yeah, that sounds great.
The only two things I know about Black Mirror are, one, there's an episode called Bandersnatch, and when I heard that, I was like, wait, you mean the monster from Resident Evil? And
that's the Black Mirror movie.
Oh, okay.
That's the Choose Your Own Adventure movie that is basically just a shittier version of what excuse me. Oh my god, what's the company that used to do Choose Your Own Adventures that went down recently?
Oh, Telltale.
Yeah, it's basically a shittier version of what Telltale was already doing. Okay. So it's just like, how dare you guys?
And the only other thing that I remember, or at least I've heard of, is what if Street Fighter but gay sex?
Yep.
Yeah, that's
there's one of those. It's that one's hilarious because we had so many conversations in QA about that where we were like, do you think like they had to have found this bug, right? Do you think they just like, did somebody just say, ship it, whatever, no one will find this? Or do you think that it's like, there's no way that feature would be in the game and somebody would not have tested it, and like we know how video games are made, Black Mirror. Like you can't fool us like that.
It's true.
Last thing I'll say on the Snyder Cut, my last bit of piece is there was a bunch of controversy going on 2 days ago on Reddit's movies subreddit, where a moderator thought that as an April Fool's joke, it would be funny to really push the idea that Zack Snyder killed his own child to make publicity for his Snyder Cut. If you're listening to this, walk into traffic.
Oh my God. Are you
walk
fucking
into
kidding
traffic.
me?
Yeah, that's a super shitty thing to do. Jesus Christ.
Holy shit.
So yeah, just had to make peace with the universe on that one.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
that's like
you don't that's not a
you absolutely do not, like, I didn't even I touched on it very briefly. I really didn't want to bring it up because I remember when we all like ended the movie and stuff and saw the credit and stuff, it's like, oh, that like it's an absolute tragedy. You do not make fun of that shit.
No,
absolutely not. Like you can say, like, I'm like, obviously we've spent the past however much time we've spent like ragging on the movie. Like do not do that. Ever to people ever.
That's fucked up.
Jesus Christ.
Bunch of savages on this planet. Jesus fuck.
Saber, what's your take?
Yeah.
From what I remember, I like it more than the theatrical cut, but I still don't like the movie. I probably maybe like it a little more than Batman v Superman, because Batman v Superman I found to be a very miserable slog. In the interest of director vision and film preservation and all that stuff, I'm 100% on board, where I'm glad that we got to see his vision like fulfilled and created and everything like that. I am also in the same camp of not every movie needs to be longer. Like I'm down with director's cuts, but director's cut doesn't necessarily mean 4 fucking goddamn hours. Like
absolutely not.
This has been like, director's cuts are nothing new. This is probably like the most noteworthy recent example. And I also kind of hate that shit rags keep calling it their own Snyder cut. It's like, it's a director's cut. It's what it's been called. It's director's cuts have existed for fucking forever. Like
I think they're trying to like I think they're just trying to bank on the whole like, oh, audiences demanded this so much and look how much better it was received. Therefore, like it's a very dumb marketing ploy. But
it's dumb. And like
those of us who know, we know it's just a director's cut, but you're gussing it up, so idiots hook, line, and sinker for it.
Because like in plenty of other instances, a director's cut can be a much superior version of the film. Like, as we briefly touched upon previously, not today, but like Aliens theatrical versus Aliens director's cut. Like, the director's cut is fan-fucking-tastic. Another example that I frequently cite is Dark City, where I like the theatrical cut of Dark City. It has some dumb, stupid voiceover narration at the start of the movie that kind of spoils the fucking movie right at the goddamn start. And, like, I don't know, like a decade later, Alex Proyas, I believe is the director, he finally got a director's cut. And it's so much better because they took out the voiceover narration and they added in all these additional scenes, but it wasn't also like a fucking 3-hour long movie. I think it went from like, I don't know, an hour 45 to like just over 2 hours or something like that. And that's fine. That's neat because you get to see, again, the original version of the movie, or like the other famous example of Exorcist: The Beginning versus Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist. Where they're 2 different directors and 2 radically different versions of the movie. And even if you hate both, and I personally like Dominion a lot, I'm glad both exist because we get to see what the original version was like and what the studio turned the movie into. I like Ben Affleck's Batman. I just wish he had better material, and I'm sad to see that he's not going to really get to be Batman for much longer. I hope Henry Cavill gets some better Superman movies. Ray Fisher is fine as Cyborg. I'm glad we got more backstory for him.
I liked him. Like, obviously, I liked him a lot better in this version. I also just think, it was, like, again, same with Cavill and Affleck. I feel like with better material, he could probably really shine.
Cyborg helped carry the narrative of that entire film.
Yeah, I would disagree strongly with the notion that he was the heart of the film, just because I don't really think that's the case.
The heart of the film was jobbing. Just the bad guys being the worst ever at their jobs.
Yep. I think of the characters, probably Lois would have been the heart of the film. If you're using her as the metric for like the emotion of what's happening. It's very dour until Superman comes back and kind of like gets snapped back to. She snapped him back to who he is, and
even though a good chunk of the movie was just spent on "LOL, my boyfriend's dead," both from Lois.
Oh my god! Oh my god! And that like extreme lingering shot of the pregnancy test, where you're just like, oh, stop!
Yeah.
I know what you're doing. Injustice is cool. Don't set up all of this stuff right now, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least she's not going to get cancer from radioactive semen like Spider-Man.
You don't know
that's true.
That's
true. We don't know. Yeah.
We'll never know.
Yeah, Superman did get nuked in space in BVS, so
Yeah, I mean,
anything can happen.
Anything is possible. All right. On the subject of nuclear fallout and radiation, Godzilla vs. Kong.
Smooth transition.
What a transition.
What a transition. I think it's safe to say that we all love the film.
Oh, yes. 100%. Yeah. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's dive in. Kat, Lee, kick us off.
Well, here's one where I actually feel like I know what I'm talking about more thoroughly. I grew up on the Godzilla movies. I've seen, I'm sure, all of them at least once, including some of the really, really dicey ones.
Like the one where the boy is getting bullied, and he has the dream sequence where he goes to Monster Island and meets Manila, who can all of a sudden talk human, and Manila's getting bullied by Gabara, and the boy learns how to stand up to bullies by watching Manila stand up to Gabara, and most of the monster fights in the movie are stock footage. Do you mean shit like that, Lee?
Oh yeah, no, I mean shit like the buddy comedy voiceovers of Godzilla and Anguirus coming out of the ocean to fight Monster Zero and Gigan.
Oh, yeah.
And they've been voiced over by really bad American voices going, "Come on, Anguirus, yeah, let's go get him." Yeah,
what the fuck?
While still having monster roars plus dialogue.
Oh my god!
In the Japanese version, apparently it's speech bubbles.
I take it back. This might be what I know the least about.
So for all the bad ones, there are absolutely stellar standouts. I think possibly the best monster movie ever made is Godzilla vs. Destroya. There's so many other killers in the series, even extremely underrated ones like Mega Gearus is great. Anything with Batra, the trilogy with Mechagodzilla ending with SOS was excellent.
Final Wars.
Oh yeah, don't get me started on Final Wars. We don't have enough time on this podcast for me to get into Final Wars. So with this new set of movies, I was never a big King Kong fan, and I, to no fault of the character, had a bad taste in my mouth from the Peter Jackson one, which I was forced to see in theaters and prayed for death every moment of it.
Oh.
I did not see Skull Island. But I saw both. I saw both the newest Godzilla flagship movie in theaters with Saber actually on opening weekend, which is awesome.
Didn't you guys get like commemorative cups or something?
That was for it.
Hell yeah.
For Godzilla, we got posters.
Got a poster for Godzilla, which had one of my favorite theater experiences of all time. I'm sitting there with Saber, we're watching the movie, and on the other side of me is this super, super excited fan, Japanese guy, spoke very, very little English, but he's like shaking his fists and he's excited and he keeps looking at me going like, yeah, Godzilla. And I'm like, yeah, dude, let's fucking go. And throughout the whole movie, he's kicking in his seat like an excited kid. It's fantastic. And then at the end of the movie, the big build-up, because it's the first time we've seen it, Godzilla fires the radioactive breath. And this dude grabs me and starts shaking me, screaming, Godzilla! I'm like, yeah, fucking A. So that obviously I have fond memories of that one. And King of the Monsters is an extremely underrated movie. I'm not surprised at the poor reviews that it gets, because some of the human storyline material can get a little irksome and drag at times. But I mean, you've got a wonderfully phoned in performance by Charles Dance. You've got you've got Millie Bobby Brown, who I'm pretty certain at this point is only accepting roles that have her infiltrating top secret government laboratories.
Sure.
Yep.
But the big screen re-debuts of Ghidorah, who is possibly the greatest kaiju villain of all time, and Mothra, who is without a doubt my favorite kaiju character of all time.
She is 100% my favorite.
Moth Mama is too wonderful for this world, which is why she spreads her magic to other galaxies. So King of the Monsters, fantastic. So expectations, I don't want to say were unrealistic for Godzilla vs. Kong. And just before we dive into the details of it collectively, I do think it is the best of the trilogy of the new Godzilla movies. I think that Kong was a fantastic way to give an emotional narrative line for the audience to connect to, as apart from just a human character, which can be the downfall of a lot of the Godzilla movies. Is as much as we love Godzilla and want to watch the film for that character, you do need human characters to actually keep the story moving.
Because he's definitely not an emotional character.
Correct.
He is a force of nature. And that's what we're watching for.
Kong was a fantastic way to give us that need. It scratched that itch.
I agree. I think that's a great great analysis of it, because like apes are already so close to us, and I mean, just I remember when that reveal that he could speak, that he could sign, he knew sign language with the girl, that and all of us kind of were like, oh, wow, like that's just a great example of like exactly what you're talking about, where they're so like us that it was a very easy in for us.
I do want to briefly interject with I slightly disagree about like not being like Godzilla only being a force of nature, just because like Godzilla versus Destroya, like the entire movie is like the emotional connection with Godzilla. Like that's like, but it has to be done a very specific way.
I should preface any of my discussion with, I've basically only seen the recent stuff.
Sure.
The only Godzilla movies I've seen outside of the current, group of American remakes are some of the very old Japanese ones, and I watched them as Mystery Science Theater episodes, and the 2000 Matthew Broderick one.
Oh yeah, no, Destroya is the movie. Destroya was the movie that ended the
Heisei era,
the pre 2000s wave of movies.
Gotcha.
And it's a heart-wrenching movie because it's got Godzilla and Godzilla's child, who's also grown into like being big formidable force himself. And throughout the course of the movie, Destroya not only beats the crap out of both of them, but successfully kills Godzilla's child and forces Godzilla to go to the point of nuclear meltdown to be able to defeat him. So Destroya is like the ultimate badass. And
like the entire like almost the before the last 60 seconds of the movie, like the last couple minutes of Destroya is Godzilla dying from a nuclear meltdown. And it's
Oh, geez.
It's gut-wrenching and it's painful. I mean, he's going to die in that movie from the start, because they at the start of the movie, they're like, Godzilla's experiencing basically the equivalent of a thermonuclear reactor melting down. His heart is giving out. So it is not going to have a happy ending.
And yet they're establishing that he has a kid. So you're like, oh, this is the passing of the torch movie.
No.
Godzilla's kid is going to be the new one going forward. No, Destroya fucking kills it. Like,
And it is.
No.
And not to mention, like, Destroya ties back to the very first Godzilla movie, where in the first Godzilla movie, they kill Godzilla with this brand new WMD called the Oxygen Destroyer, which they brought back for King of the Monsters.
Yes.
And basically, whatever the fuck that this thing did, it wound up like mutating basic sea life. And over the course of the last 40, 50 years, it mutated into this horrible abomination of a fucking monster.
Yeah.
Cool.
And Destroya is the living essence of the man-made weapon that killed Godzilla.
Nice.
And
so it's like, it's fucking great.
But yeah, I only wanted to bring that up of just like, I agree with you mostly, but there is one instance.
Yes. Going exclusively off of this trilogy and how this trilogy has presented Godzilla, I would argue that there is still some emotional heart to be found with Godzilla himself. Because there are moments, and then this is something I did want to touch on, like maybe a little bit later, once we got through this first part. But there is some genuine like acting on Godzilla's part where you can feel what he's feeling.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he's necessarily like this just a force of nature, but what I am saying is I think the movie does present him as a bit more unknowable.
Yes.
In that regard, like
I can agree with that.
The people even themselves kind of talk about how they don't know what he's doing, and it's like oh, he's, it takes them a very long time to realize like, oh, he's not necessarily a protector or a destroyer. This is just like this is his turf. He's fighting for himself, and like,
Or Kyle Chandler has a complete 180 on his character development from the previous movie.
God, yeah, let's just ignore that completely. He was barely in the movie, so like, who cares? I think he answered a phone. That was like his scenes where
he had like he had 3 scenes
to talk to Millie Bobby Brown.
Every scene involved Millie Bobby Brown, basically.
Yeah. But
your overall impressions were positive.
Yes, very positive. To that point, my so my experience is basically just with these new movies, and
I'll change
but
that.
I am definitely a student of like creature design, and I think this is where I will respectfully disagree with Lee, that I think King of the Monsters is slightly better for me as a Godzilla movie, because I felt like the acting for the monsters, for all of the monsters, was just a touch stronger in that movie, because it's not that hard for me to buy an ape emoting, just because we have tons of evidence that they actually do, and all that stuff. But like, to see a 3-headed lizard and to know the personality of each of those 3 heads just by the way he's moving around and reacting to things, I was just like, those animators are geniuses.
No, like, the best scene of the movie is when Godzilla's just been given a hard beating by Ghidorah and is lying in a smoking pile, and Mothra crawls over his back in like that last act of, if you want him, you gotta get through me. Yeah. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
She's the best.
Yeah, I am
our queen.
I'm also in, like, I love Godzilla vs. Kong, and I definitely think it has better, or at least more entertaining monster fights, and more the shots are way more
so
creatively
good.
shot.
You can see the fights.
Godzilla vs. Kong. Yeah, for starters, yes. But at least...
let's just real quick praise the fact that the big final team up takes place in the daylight.
Yes.
In broad daylight.
Yeah.
But at least for me, partly because of Mothma.
With like Godzilla body cam?
Yes.
Amazing.
Partly because of Moth Mama, partly because of King Shitheel, King Ghidorah. primarily due to my own complete biased nostalgia of wanting to fucking hear Godzilla's theme in an American Godzilla movie and finally getting that wish. And not only that, but also Mothra's theme. I am in camp King of the Monsters I prefer, but I do love Godzilla vs. Kong quite a bit.
Yeah.
Well, the soundtrack for King of the Monsters was extraordinary. Bear McCreary did an awesome job. Mothra's theme definitely being the highlight of it.
And
fantastic.
using Serge Takion's cover of Godzilla for the end credits. I love it.
Serge Tankian is too wonderful for this world.
It is delightful.
And also we're gonna nobody enjoyed the human scenes of either movie.
I found them more likable in this one.
You think so?
I think that the conspiracy theorist character was a fun change of pace. The kid who was tagging along, who was like the foil of he's not the cool one. Like he's out of the loop on the secret mission. All right, he can go away. Mm-hmm. But Millie Brown teaming up with conspiracy nut was great.
That was the kid from Deadpool 2.
Yes.
Also.
Yes.
Which
I didn't put those together.
For me,
it weirded me out a little bit just because he was and I guess this speaks to his acting. He was such a fucking brat in Deadpool 2 that to see him be a nice kid, I was like, oh wow, threw me for a loop a little bit. But yeah, he was mostly just the foil, the comic relief sort of, and we didn't really need it because we already had the kind of a little bit of an odd couple thing going on with the super young kid who knows all her shit and the conspiracy theorist. So yeah.
In regards to human stuff.
Also Boy Band was in this, so
Boy Band.
I automatically like the human stuff better in
for me,
Godzilla vs. Kong.
For me, outside of a handful of moments, namely the first Godzilla movie, 1954, Godzilla Final Wars because of fucking Don Fry, Shin Godzilla because the political stuff, Cranston in Godzilla 2014 along with Serizawa between 2014 and King of the Monsters. So long as the human stuff is not an elementary school kid getting picked on by bullies who then hallucinates himself on Monster Island and learns how to stand up to bullies from Manila, the human stuff I can take or leave. I think it's fine in King of the Monsters. I think it's fine in Godzilla vs. Kong. I don't find it insufferable. Wait, hold on. 98 Godzilla with Matthew Broderick. Yeah, it's insufferable, but that's not even really a Godzilla movie, to be fair. So at least for me, my standards for human shit are just so long as it's not insufferable, I don't care. Even if it's boring and I'm uninvested in the human characters, I don't care. My lizard brain, no pun intended, just doesn't really care when it comes to my boy Godzilla.
Well, I think that this movie presented some of the more unique scenarios for the human storyline.
Oh, sure.
We had this whole center of the earth
that was
angle,
so cool.
Which
that was pretty cool.
Was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really great approach. I was worried that they were just going to turn Skull Island into the new Monster Island. And more Titans were going to keep appearing on Skull Island. It's well, that would make a whole lot of sense because they already answered the call in the last movie.
Mm-hmm.
But having the center of the earth, prehistoric idea, and they have to pass through a gravitational gateway to get out and shit. It was beautiful. The location looked like something out of Avatar. It opens up all kinds of possibilities of this is where all the other monsters can come from.
Yeah.
This is how we can get Anguirus.
Agreed.
And all my favorite old jobbers like Manda and Varan.
We can't get Space Godzilla from there though. We need space for Space Godzilla.
You need space for Ghidorah, Space Godzilla, and Gigan. But
I will say I think to your point, I think that space was interesting as a world, and I think it was interesting as Kong interacting with it and moving through it. I still did not find the human element of it interesting as evidenced by me at the end of the movie going, wait, that guy's name was Nathan?
Yes.
Because I barely remembered anyone's name, and because that's not why I was there.
I don't even remember Cranston's name from 2014. I just know it was Bryan Cranston. But Cranston was the best part of the human shit in 2014.
Well, but he was,
and it was a mistake to kill him off.
Yeah, I know. He was only there for like 30 minutes, and then he was dead.
Yeah, I know, but that's a mistake. I will 100% admit they shouldn't have killed fucking Cranston. He should have been there the whole goddamn movie. Fuck.
Mm-hmm.
But Cranston was still the best.
It's a difficult situation you find yourself in when a lot of the people who want to watch these films are watching it to watch the monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Not even to necessarily watch them in their big action scenes, just they want to see the monsters, like just Godzilla or Kong emoting and being characters.
Oh, that's me.
Whereas, like, a couple movies found a way around it. Shin Godzilla is excellent because the human element is the driving force of the movie, and it's how their government is handling the issue. Destroya is fantastic because the movie randomly becomes aliens halfway through.
Oh, yeah.
Destroya splits into a swarm of little ones that infest a factory, and the government dispatches a super SWAT team, and it becomes fucking aliens for 20 minutes. It doesn't make any sense, but it's brilliant. But with a lot of them, it's, some 8-year-old kid with a baseball cap and an oversized, like, poofy jacket who's getting picked on, and Jet Jaguar's got to show up and dance for 45 minutes. The human element is always tricky. And I think at least throwing in Kong as something to work off of the humans with and having this whole Avatar world in the center of the earth, it was at least something new. It was something fresh.
Yeah.
And it gave Kong the thing that I heard the most... I don't want to say complaint, but I guess criticism about going into the movie, which is, how is Kong going to be a worthy opponent?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's not even go into how there already was a Godzilla versus King Kong back in the day in which they did fight, and depending on which edition of the film you watch, there's versions where each one wins.
That's actually a giant lie. The ending is the same in both the Japanese version and the US version. It's just been a long-running myth that has been claimed as fact for almost 60, 70 years. Yeah, technically Kong wins the original film. I mean, Godzilla isn't seen after they both fall into the ocean, but it's actually the same ending in both the Japanese and American versions.
Well, I'm willing to admit I got Kazammed.
Oh no, it's fine. That is such common knowledge at this point that it is. Oh, there's two different cuts. Like it's the truth has basically been buried. There's so much. I think there was even like an old "You Don't Know Jack," where it's like, oh, this is a fact in it, and it's like, but it's not a fact. It's like it's one of those things that just persisted for so long that people are convinced it's the truth. And it did not help that I think it wasn't until the Criterion release of Godzilla versus King Kong versus Godzilla that the Japanese version was made available in the West. So it's like a lot of people didn't have anything to work off of. So it's fine.
Wait, what do you mean Kazam?
Oh, it's like a Berenstein Bears situation.
No, but what does because I found that hilarious, and now I'm thinking either of the oh no wait, that's Shazam. You're talking about the genie one, right?
Yeah, I got the two mixed up. Yeah, I'm talking about Sinbad.
Okay, wait. Oh.
Yeah, there are people who are convinced that there's a movie called Shazam.
Yeah, Shazam. Yeah, I got Kazam mixed up with the Shaq one.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, James, explain it.
Somebody explain this, because I'm
basically similar to the whole Berenstein Bears situation of not knowing how it's spelled and the whole Mandela effect of it. There's a Mandela effect of people being convinced that the movie Kazam with Shaq was actually a movie called Shazam with Sinbad.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and it that has been persisting for a long time too. And even Funny or Die got in on the humor, and they got Sinbad to help record a fake trailer for Shazam a couple years ago. But
oh my god,
it's just another instance of just facts getting obscured, or in this case, just mostly because people were misremembering, as just opposed to back in the 60s, nobody really fucking knew any better because just you didn't get the Japanese films because the main thing is like at the time King Kong versus Godzilla was made, that was the third Godzilla movie. Godzilla up until that point was an antagonist, and he still is an antagonist in King Kong versus Godzilla. And King Kong was actually a far more popular character in Japan than Godzilla was. Like, King Kong is the reason why Godzilla was made in the first place, because they were still doing re-releases of the film all over the world, and it was doing gangbusters. So Toho was like, fuck it, let's make our own King Kong type movie, which was Godzilla. And then for the third movie, they were like, how can we make a boatload of money? Let's stick King Kong in it. So they had King Kong as the protagonist, basically, and Godzilla as the antagonist, and King Kong's costume is fucking awful, and he drinks monkey booze, and he beats up Godzilla, and Godzilla beats him up, and then they both fall into the ocean, and after they fall into the ocean, King Kong emerges and walks away, while Godzilla just isn't seen again.
Oh.
So it's like, yeah, it's whatever.
Well, it actually lends a little bit more.
Doesn't he live in the ocean, though?
He does, yeah.
Well, maybe he just went home.
Yeah, basically.
It lends a little bit more to my point, because the issue I kept hearing leading up to the film was that King Kong is not a good match for Godzilla.
Right, yeah.
And so, okay, so even if the definitive version of the original is Kong wins, okay, so that's even better.
Although in that one, Kong had lightning powers, so it was even... but still, to your point.
Yeah, and in this one, they still gave Kong all the equipment that he needed. Going to this ancient subterranean world and finding that his people were the rulers of it, that he had a throne and his people had like an axe that was made from the spines of Godzilla's ancestors.
Yes,
fucking great. It gives Kong the ability to harness Godzilla's own radioactive energy in the weapon, like. For the big issue leading up to the movie to be like, oh, I don't see how it's a fair fight. Like, I'm sorry, it was a very fair fight in the first movie. They gave all the tools necessary to make it a great fight in this movie.
It's the only I think the only people who would say it's not a fair fight. I mean, granted, I was joking that Godzilla was going to stomp Kong, but that is because I am a biased Godzilla fan. But it is always a fair fight, regardless of how ridiculous the kaiju is, because that's what needs to fucking happen. Even what was it, Ibera? That stupid fucking lobster?
Ibera, yeah.
Yeah, Ibera? It's a stupid fucking lobster. The only time it is not a fair fight is in Godzilla Final Wars, where Godzilla literally wrecks ass until he gets to fucking Ghidorah and Gigan. That's it. It's always going to be a fair fight, because otherwise there's no conflict. There's no fun monster battles.
Right.
Exactly.
Plus,
if Godzilla just jobs Darkseid in the first 5 minutes, why are you gonna sit?
And then Darkseid forgets what planet had the giant radiation-breathing lizard.
All right, listen though, if Godzilla had showed up in that fucking flashback fight, how excited!
I wouldn't have been phased.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been phased.
I would have just nodded and went, sure.
Yeah, we would have been like, oh, I guess the DCEU can contain kaijus, sure, whatever.
Yeah, and plus also, I mean, I think at least in this one too, like, it made great use of Kong's intelligence, and the fact that Godzilla can be fast, sure, but Godzilla's tanky. Kong is much more agile and using guerrilla tactics and being able to bounce off of stuff and
I mean,
get creative.
and you noticed at the end of the fight, Godzilla is like so animalistic in how he's fighting.
Yeah.
He gets down on all fours and it's is
which
just
is insane.
like wrecking shit.
I've never seen that in a Godzilla movie before, and it was so cool.
Awesome.
He's just fucking being a goddamn alligator crocodile, just wrecking shit. And yeah, no, I thought Kong was handled beautifully, and like I'm also in camp. Kong never really completely resonated with me. Like, he's fine in Kong Skull Island. Peter Jackson's King Kong is like whatever. I haven't seen the 70s remake or its sequel. I refuse to see Son of Kong because I hear it's terrible. And the original King Kong, it's like, yeah, it's super, super iconic, but it's like, yeah, he's mostly just like, he has some emotion to him, but it's like, he's not Godzilla. I didn't really grow up with Kong as often as I did with Godzilla, but I still was. I don't like. Of course, it's gonna be a fair fight, and I'm just really happy that Kong was handled so beautifully. And he's the heart. He's the heart of the movie.
I think that the biggest positive takeaway, and we touched on this with the Snyder cut, but here it'll actually have the more positive outcome. Godzilla vs. Kong performing as well as it is right now means it's going to keep going.
Yeah.
Because King of the Monsters had a very poor reception among critics. And Godzilla vs. Kong has turned it around.
Well, if I remember correctly, it was below 50, but not abysmal, right?
When it was in theaters, it was high 30s.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was low 40s, but
it's now low 40s, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
okay. Now it's okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Which I think, I remember. I think the Red Letter Media, like, they're half in the bag. I think they did King of Monsters and Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
In the same episode.
Yeah.
And they were like, their scores are like 40 and 60, and the truth is somewhere in the middle for both of them.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at, where I'm like, I think, well, actually, no, because I loved King of the Monsters, but I mean, I probably looking at it critically, I'd probably also give it like a 50. Just because, I mean, like, if you're taking the whole thing, and
if you're going into King of the Monsters and you want a sensible, non-silly story with super compelling human characters, you're gonna be disappointed. But if you're going into it for monster fights, there still may be some disappointment in regards to how there's more human shit than monster fights, even though that is a reoccurring problem throughout most of the Godzilla movies, even the Japanese ones. Like, it's mostly human shit until monsters pop up. And you may be disappointed because in the effort to mask the CG and to make it age better, they stick the fights at night and filled with rain and smoke. God. And it's like, I understand why you're doing it, but it does make it a little difficult to see shit. And I can understand that. It also kind of breaks my heart
because, like, that's, I'm also kind of like that. That's also like special effects, right? Like, they're not actually filming in the rain.
Yeah.
They're actually adding rain effects on it too. Can you imagine being the VFX artist that's just like, I just gotta hide Godzilla for like 8 months of my career?
Yep. And that's one thing I can definitely say with King of the Monsters, or not King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, is even though I do prefer King of the Monsters, like, even the fight at night, it's bright and filled with fucking neon, so you can see shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I can get behind this. Even if 5 years from now the CGI doesn't hold up as well, I don't really care because it's a Godzilla movie. I'm not expecting it to be, like, blend seamlessly. Like, it's not like watching Sam Raimi's Spider-Man now and going like, wow, it looks like a cartoon. Like Spider-Man swinging around when Spider-Man is supposed to be realistic. It's a giant monster. It's I know it's not real. At least for me, anyway. Like, I don't care. Like, give me my monsters. That's all I want.
Give me my monsters.
Give it to me.
Speaking of monsters.
Is that our segue to Twin Peaks?
I think so.
Well, it is now.
It could be.
All right, so final verdict on Godzilla vs. Kong. We all loved it.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah,
no complaints.
Four monkeys out of 5. Yeah, excellent movie. Yep. It's in my top 10 Godzilla films ever.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
It is.
If you're just like me and you just like seeing cool monster designs and cool like monster like acting, animation, all that stuff, is more of that. Is good.
Well,
it's great.
It doesn't have Don Fry, which let's work on that for the next one. But
it had boy band though, and Mr. the Nun.
And Mr. the Nun. Well, listen, Kat, we are definitely going to. I didn't know that you hadn't seen so few Godzilla movies, so we're gonna have to do a lot more Godzilla watch parties.
I really want to see Shin Godzilla.
Oh, you're gonna see it. You're also gonna see it. All Monsters Attack, which is the one where the stupid goddamn bully. I hate you. No, you're gonna watch it because we're gonna riff it and we're gonna have fun, and it's gonna be less insufferable than Justice League. It's not gonna be as bad as Justice League.
Oh God! It was like, give me the Snyder cut of that movie.
It's gonna be pretty bad though.
Oh my God!
All right, so Twin Peaks. How the fuck do we start Twin Peaks?
Well, I think we just need to like retouch on that bit of backstory for the context.
Okay.
Saber and I have known each other for a long time, and Twin Peaks is something that has been brought up during many a drinking session of Blue Moons in his driveway. You got to see Twin Peaks. You got to see Twin Peaks. And everything that I had seen about it from like the pop culture standpoint was, weird, wacky red room and strange audio shit happens. And it didn't appeal to me. I'm a fan of Lynch's work. But for some reason, I just never wanted to give this show a shot. And apparently, I'm not the only person who Saber was trying to get into this show.
Both of you are two of many who I have been trying to get into the show. My work is never done trying to get more people to watch Twin Peaks.
That is very true. I have not known James as long. Only like 3 years? 4 years?
4 years now, because since Lost Legacy.
I'm like, when was Lost Legacy? Time doesn't exist anymore.
Time is a flat circle.
Yeah, time is a flat circle. But yeah, it was kind of just I really hadn't heard too much about it other than that it was weird. I've seen a lot of Lynch's other stuff. I like his movies. And yeah, then James was just like, hey, let's just watch Twin Peaks since there's a pandemic and you don't have anything else to do. And I'm like, hey,
you're trapped.
Yeah, and I've officially cornered with a
You're trapped in here with to circle back to Snyder. You're trapped in here with me.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, no, so I definitely do not regret it though.
And for me personally, Twin Peaks was something I had known about for a long time because my dad was a fan of Twin Peaks. However, due to the Twin Peaks' subject matter, young baby boy James was not allowed to watch Twin Peaks, even though he saw a couple clips every now and then. And then, one Christmas, like 2007, I think, I got my dad the complete DVD box set for Twin Peaks. And I had still never seen it or known really anything about it. But I got him the box set for Christmas because I knew he liked the show. And that was basically, once he opened that, he basically was like, well, you and I are watching the entire thing. And I was like, okay, sure, fine, whatever. And that was my introduction to Twin Peaks. My dad cornering me, similar to how I cornered you. And then,
so you're just keeping the tradition alive.
I'm keeping the tradition alive. It just, it took a lot longer for me to corner you two, as opposed to my dad, who did it within an hour.
You got to work on that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next group you seduce to the dark side will be, only take like a couple months, then you'll have a couple weeks, you'll work up to it.
Exactly. So both of you had heard it was weird. And then what were your impressions from like the first episode?
Well, before we get too deep into it, just in case viewers haven't seen anything for Twin Peaks, This is only spoilers for the first 2 seasons of the show and for the film Fire Walk with Me. We haven't done anything yet for the 3rd season, which will be coming soon.
Starting next week.
Yeah.
So first impressions are tonally, it was nothing like what I expected, because
not at all.
All of the things that have become part of this Twin Peaks meme culture only start to materialize very, very infrequently in the first season and then very late in the 2nd season. The entire series does have a persistent quirky charm about it that I kind of feel is Lynch's, just like that's his characteristics, just kind of it's in there. He's trying to do his strange fantasy supernatural stuff with the plot and then still keep that little down to earth, tugging on your heartstring humanity about it. But all of this meme culture, it almost isn't present in the first 2 seasons until the very end. Bits of the Red Room, the Black Lodge, show up now and then, and you'll get the weird reversed audio segments that have become famous from the show. So first impressions of small town, girl murdered, FBI agent dispatched, it felt just like any sort of primetime TV investigative show.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like this legendary oddity that it had been pitched as by people.
100%. I remember getting, especially because so much of the sort of like push for me to watch Twin Peaks was the comparison to Deadly Premonition, which I have watched, been played, and I played a little bit of. So having that as my baseline for, okay, this is what Twin Peaks is going to be, and seeing that first episode was very much like, people oversold the weirdness here by a mile. Which I still think maybe it was a little bit oversold how weird it was.
Sure.
But it does get weird.
It gets very weird.
And I think some of my favorite aspects of it were the fact that Lynch is kind of coming at this as a film director.
Yes.
Over a TV director, where like a lot of the show is shot like a soap opera, but in terms of like storyline and like narrative and how things play out and kind of like where things go, but the cinematography is all film. It's very filmic. It goes to some very weird places, especially with the audio mixing. His audio was some of the most creative usage of sound effects to elicit horror and to elicit emotions, any sort of like disturbing or I mean, even I would even argue that like he also does it to elicit like the opposite of disturbing emotions too, because there's also this really nice kind of like familiar warmth with like the show. I don't know if you guys necessarily felt this, but I didn't necessarily feel it, I think, while we were watching, but when I think back on it, it's like there's this like fondness for the kind of like really gentle like little
the little Cooper moments and
the gentle goofy sorry, what's it called, soap opera moments. Where you're just like, oh yeah, like we all kind of didn't appreciate like James, and that those like
I also
plot
don't
lines
appreciate
were a little
me.
bit.
I never appreciate me.
Yeah, the James and Donna plot threads are almost entirely unnecessary.
Yes,
but I get what you mean. There is the sort of charm to these characters that you forget that you're watching a mind-bending show about a murder.
Yeah,
when you've got such a quirky, lovable lead as Agent Dale Cooper,
when
sitting
you have
and having coffee and pie with the sheriff. And
when you have a little scene of Lucy and what's his face filling in a crossword puzzle. I don't think it was Andy. I think it was somebody else. It's like one of the. It was like. There's just so many little moments that I remember where I'm just like, it's not even necessary. It's almost like a nostalgic feeling for a moment I didn't personally experience.
That's
and I feel like that was elicited because of Lynch's like filmic experience.
That's also
like,
why
I feel like that's what he brought to.
That's also why I had us watch the opening so often, because at least for me, like that opening sequence with the Twin Peaks opening theme and just the shots of the landscape, for me that like it gives me that warmth and nostalgia and like comfort of just like I'm easing myself back into this world, and just I can't wait to go back on this ride. And that bird, that sweet bird.
Yeah, the sweet bird. I am a sucker for opening themes anyway. So I very rarely skip over intros for shows.
Same.
I've been trying to get James to watch Erased.
I will. We're going to do it for this podcast.
Erased, you should never skip the intro for.
We're going to do it for this podcast once we're done with Twin Peaks, Kat. That's
awesome. But yeah, and I have never skipped an intro for Attack on Titan either, because I need to hear those songs all the time.
Especially when it comes to a lot of anime. Yeah, there are just songs you don't. You know, if you're watching Evangelion, you better stand and put your hand over your heart for the national anthem of Weeb's Cruel Angel's Thesis.
It's illegal to skip the openings of Evangelion and Cowboy Bebop. It's illegal.
To a not as like epic degree, I feel like the Twin Peaks theme does the same thing, where it gets you right into it. It fits exactly the mood of the show. It's a little weird, a little quirky, but mostly really wholesome. And you're like, oh yeah. And you forget, it lulls you into false security, because you forget it's about a horrible murder and a bunch of horrible things happening below the surface. And that's the whole point.
Yep. I also don't skip the Breaking Bad intro, because
hell yeah.
On one hand,
10 seconds.
It's 10 seconds, but also I dig that brief theme, you know. But yeah, it Twin Peaks lulls you into a false sense of security so much that sometimes you even forget that the horrible things that have happened have occurred to fucking minors. Like Laura Palmer is 17. And like a lot of the shit that we were watching in like Fire Walk with Me, which we'll get to when we see Laura Palmer and like Ronat Pulaski and even Donna, as much as we hate Donna, some of the shit that happens to her, we have to remember that they're fucking 17. And it's like, it makes it
a very
really
dark show. Yeah.
It covered a lot of, it lulls you into that false sense of security before hitting you with some really dark and heinous and gut-wrenching shit, like Leland and Sarah finding out that their daughter was murdered. Like that entire shot in the opening of Sarah on the phone with Leland, and Leland's trying to calm her down. It's like, oh, I'm sure she's fine. And then he overhears the sheriff go like, is Leland Palmer around? And just that look on Ray Wise's face, and just Sarah being like, Leland, what is it? What is it? What is it? And he just can't say anything. Like that entire thing is just so gut-wrenching. And it's so sad. Like, god damn. Then we get a goofy scene with some other character immediately afterwards. Pete Martell or Nadine or whatever. Or David Lynch screaming.
Well, and that's a great contrast too, is when you have such a diverse cast, you need those lighter, more jovial aspects to contrast the horrible darkness that's going on with the show. And this is something that Kat and I have debated a bit in the past, is the size of the roster, size of the cast. I personally love shows that have massive amounts of cast members. Game of Thrones, I love following the storylines of 30 people. And Twin Peaks could have admittedly shaved off a handful and made the story more concise. But when you've got a rich cast of side characters like, the intrepid Audrey Horne trying to get to the bottom of her friend Laura's death, or the adorable deputy Andy, who's trying to manage being a competent officer of the law and figure out if he's the father of a child that he didn't expect. And then, of course, the adventures of the mystical skinwalking sorcerer of space.
God damn it.
You need a variety.
Your favorite character.
you need a variety of different layers and flavors of characters with a show of that tone.
Yeah.
And if you cut out James and Josie, then you've got a good cast.
Yes. To harken back to our debate, I would argue that I don't hate large casts. I think as a, not even necessarily as a rule, but just as a preference, I like smaller, like tighter stories. Just that's my personal preference. I think it works really, really well for Twin Peaks and for games like Game of Thrones. You know, I think it works for sprawling stories. I think in Twin Peaks it works really well because it shows just kind of how. I actually read a tweet about this recently, where it was talking about how Twin Peaks was like a master class in how to make a murder show about the victim, as opposed to, you know, and it just goes to show you that, like, yeah, that is actually true, because that whole cast, every single one of them had some relation to Laura.
Yep.
You know, no matter how kind of like tangential it was, they all kind of tied back into her.
They were all affected by.
Oh, they were all
death,
affected by it,
regardless of how scummy they were, like fucking Bobby Briggs.
They were.
So I think that works. I think James sucked.
I do suck, but also James Hurley sucks.
No, I think a couple of the characters were maybe extraneous in a way that their role could have been performed by an existing member of the crew without much being changed, like without anything really being too different. Like I feel like a lot of the James Donna scenes that happened didn't really give us insight into James or Donna, and didn't give us any insight into Laura and the murder and what was actually happening to the like main kind of like MacGuffin plot, that somebody else couldn't have also gotten.
Yeah,
like a revelation somebody else couldn't have gotten.
Well, like,
sorry, go ahead.
Like what you're saying too, like, is, for example, so we have the Cooper and law enforcement investigation of who killed Laura Palmer, right? And we have James and Donna, and then eventually Maddie. And I'm fine with Maddie as a character, right? Especially because we got to see more Cheryl Lee alive. But we have them basically. We have them basically being the Scooby-Doo gang and trying to solve Laura's murder. But then we also have Audrey Horne trying to solve Laura's murder because she has an attachment to Cooper, because she has the hots for him. And it's like, you could have dropped the James and Donna stuff and just beefed up Audrey even a little more. And at least for me, and I am guessing both of you, Audrey was at least a far more interesting and compelling character to investigate this sort of shit, especially since she gets in over her head.
Yeah, I loved Audrey. I think you could have probably given her a Scooby Gang. Like, you know, if basically you just wrap up if you just tied, like, have a different character, have a different, you know, I mean, you could even have James just write him better. But yeah, if it had been like Audrey, James, and was it Betty?
Yeah.
Did you say? Yeah.
Maddie,
if it had been them, I might have actually been more okay with it. But I think because we had this like just like essentially like a Nancy Drew and a Scooby Gang, I was kind of like, one of these things is better than the other. So I'm less interested in wasting time on only you covers.
and one of those things interacts with Best Boy Cooper more often, which is why it's better than the other. True
dat. Although I was pretty disturbed by that stuff, but
it's
me.
No, it's I feel you on that. Again, at least they wrote it out eventually. I'm fine with it going one way, of her just being like, I have the hots for Cooper.
And that makes sense. But yeah, if he had reciprocated, I think that would have been a lot over the line for me.
Yeah. I'm glad they had that scene of Cooper being like, no, we're friends, and being like, no, it's immoral, it's against my code. I appreciate you as a friend, and like, you can't do this. Like, no, I can't do this. You're a high schooler. I don't care if you're 18 or not. You're a high schooler. No. I appreciate that Kyle MacLachlan kind of put his foot down for that, even if it probably
you were
stemmed
saying
from.
It was probably more due to the fact that
He was dating Laura Flynn Boyle, and Laura Flynn Boyle didn't want that because she didn't like Sherilyn Fenn, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, Twin Peaks is a show that, especially in those 2 seasons, was just plagued by, I don't want to just say outside interference, because, I mean, the channels and all the behind-the-scenes stuff was also to blame for the strange pacing of the 2nd season and the early reveal of the murderer.
And we'll get there.
Yeah. But yeah, also having things like personal likes and dislikes of the cast come into play and alter the predicated storyline. It's just there's a lot of strange intricacies to such a short show.
Yep.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah. And
which is not necessarily unheard of, that these things outside influence. And it's also not necessarily unheard of, at least for me, that those things kind of, you know, sometimes make things for the better, right? I know we had talked about before, to harken back to the Snyder cut that I had mentioned, you know, being happy for less studio interference.
Yeah.
But I do think that doesn't necessarily mean zero studio interference.
Oh yeah.
Or zero interference from outside sources whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because I do think that, you know, at some point you can get into a situation where, like, the emperor, the director, the creative head of the show or whatever, can have no clothes. And then, you know, you do want to, like, you get into a Lucas situation, right? Where it's oh, nobody can say no to George Lucas because he created fucking Star Wars, and then we end up with the prequels.
Like a good example of just somewhat interference, like in this case cast, is Breaking Bad, where Giancarlo Esposito's Gus Fring was only supposed to be a minor character, and Vince Gilligan liked working with him and was like, hey, can we bring you back for season 3? And Giancarlo Esposito saw potential with Gus and told him, you can bring me back only if my role is expanded. And Vince Gilligan is very, from what I've heard, open to adjusting shit and making the show better. I mean, like, as we've seen and as we've heard, like, Jesse was supposed to die in season 1, but the writer's strike pushed that to be a potential season 2 thing, only for Vince Gilligan to grow attached to Jesse because of Aaron Paul's performance and keep him around, thus making him the fucking heart of Breaking Bad. Stabbing at Justice League again.
Oh my god.
But, like, and I think we can all agree that Giancarlo Esposito sticking around as Gus Fring throughout season 3 and 4 was to the benefit of Breaking Bad.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
I would also like to once again circle back to Erased and say that the ending for Erased in the anime is very different, and it is very much the better for it. So yeah, I would argue sometimes stuff by committee can be better than stuff by solo artists.
Yeah.
But yeah, going on. Yes, Twin Peaks definitely. Like I feel like that's one example where I personally am okay with outside interference affecting the story. But yeah, from the later stuff, it's pretty clear that it's it was not 100%, but it was definitely not beneficial for Twin Peaks.
Yeah, it's, I guess, to get to the dark spot of Twin Peaks for those listening who haven't seen the show. They forced the creative team to reveal the killer about, I don't know, seven episodes into to Twin Peaks, and then they wrap up that entire storyline a couple episodes later. And then the show kind of immediately takes a very, very strong nosedive in quality and becomes a pretty bit rocky. I mean, it still has some fun stuff, I think, especially, like, I can dig the Cooper stuff. That's also where we got David Duchovny, who was amazing.
A very strong second act villain in Wyndham Earl, who's charming performance, great character work.
I do think that
some nice scenery chewing.
Yeah. I do think that Twin Peaks would have benefited if the reveal of the killer and wrapping that up was the end of the second season, and then they gave the writers a full year to figure out how to continue from there, as opposed to just immediately follow this up with whatever the fuck you can, which is James fucking around, doing nothing, and Nadine becoming a cheerleader, and Ben Horn losing his mind and thinking he's a Civil War veteran.
For 6 episodes.
episodes. Oh my god. No, yeah, that was concurrent with Nadine thinking she was a high school student.
Yes.
God. Ugh.
Yes.
And gaining superpowers somehow.
And
yes.
Well, to be fair, the superpowers they kind of hinted at earlier on in season 1 that she had insane strength. But it did become a little preposterous when she became a cheerleader.
Yeah.
And was throwing people around all willy-nilly. And then Josie becoming a maid. And then eventually becoming a doorknob. Although I'm fine with her becoming a doorknob, because that was weird.
We need more people being morphed into doorknobs in fiction.
Yeah.
100%.
100%.
I'm upset it's only happened once.
And then it does kind of start to redeem itself a little bit, because it starts focusing more on Wyndham Earl. Although not immediately, because there's still some of that rough stuff. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to say about the rough stuff.
Mercifully, we skipped over all of the James scenes, so that was nice.
I think I did not subject you to any of the James scenes.
I think, therefore, Lee and I have a bit of a nicer opinion of that rough patch than most people.
You might, because
I don't want to speak for Lee, but I remember thinking it wasn't as bad as you had kind of forewarned, and the little metric thingy had forewarned.
Yes.
But then you reminded us that, oh well, that's because we skipped 20 minutes an episode, and I was like, oh, God, that's right.
Yeah. So basically, James Hurley fucks off, and he meets some lady, and she asks him to fix this car that she fucked up that belongs to her husband, and then James Hurley and her kind of start up this romantic relationship, and we find out that she and the manservant at this place are actually in cahoots and lovers, and are trying to use James Hurley as the fall guy for their reject film noir plot where they kill her husband. And but she starts kind of getting second thoughts, because she starts to genuinely care about James Hurley for some reason. And then Donna shows up because she likes James Hurley for some reason, even though he's James Hurley. And then the big confrontation happens, and the film noir femme fatale lady kills her manservant, if I remember correctly. And she's like, "Go, I'm gonna take the fall. I had a redemption because of you." And then James Hurley and Donna fuck off. And then James is like, "All right, I'm going to California. I'm gonna leave the entire series forever." And Donna's like, "Just you, stupid song." And that's the end of James Hurley. As you can see, we didn't miss much of 6 episodes of James Hurley plot. I mean, we can watch it if you want. Please say no.
God, no.
Thank you.
God, no.
Thank you. And then the show kind of starts getting weirder, even though it also has the Miss Twin Peaks patch and stuff, which I know you hated, Kat. Or at least kind of disliked.
Once I kind of figured out that the Queen thing was part of it, that he was like targeting one of them, I was like, okay, well, it has something to do with it. I was just kind of like,
what does this have to do with anything?
Yeah, just kind of like, all right, we're just getting all the together. I get what they were going for, but I was just kind of like, eh.
Lee, what about you? Do you have anything to say about the rough patch and the rebound?
I mean, it comes down to kind of what I touched on earlier of just needing to whittle down certain aspects of the cast. And unfortunately, the situation with the structure of the second season, with needing to rush the reveal, it put a lot of characters into a super tough spot of You know, why are we still following this person?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we care?
Yeah.
You know, if the only reason that they were around is because they were Laura's friend, then it's time for them to leave the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, hastily throwing in Billy Zane. And as much as I like Billy Zane, and I thought he was fine in the show, he doesn't really do anything.
No, he was there as an unnecessary addition to Audrey's storyline, which already with the new writing direction was absurd.
Yes.
Audrey having been under the thumb of her father and victimized and nearly sexually assaulted by him, then suddenly has a change of heart and wants to run the family business, and she loves her daddy. It was absurd.
And she's got to rescue him from the Civil War. That was just it was such a I think Audrey's character probably suffered the most from the I almost want to say writer's strike.
We suffered the most, Kat.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah, she definitely took a major character hit, because before that she was so gutsy in everything she did. And so then brazen. Suddenly she was, I think we had like one little element of being gutsy, which was when she was threatening her uncle.
Yeah.
I think that was the only moment where I was like, oh, there's the old Audrey. And then it was gone immediately.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, all right.
Like, I love Audrey Horne until the bad shit, the quality tanks. And it's like, we have nothing to give Audrey Horne. And it's like, you're wasting such a compelling and interesting character.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
Like, she's so fun and gutsy and brazen and bold and kind of a brat, but deep down her heart's kind of in the right place, despite being a brat. Like, you know, in that first episode, she fucking completely ruins her dad's like whole investment thing because she tells the people trying to invest, hey, a girl got murdered here. And it's like she's a spoiled little rich brat, but deep down she does kind of want to do the right thing to an extent. It's interesting, and she's bold and brazen and brash, and then she just doesn't really do anything except for fall in love with Billy Zane and claim that Billy Zane is the love of her life, even though I thought Cooper was the love of her life.
She's a young girl, James. She doesn't understand.
Apparently. But then we get to the season finale, which I told you was the a big increase in quality.
Yes.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is where we can really start sinking our teeth into the perceived image that Twin Peaks has.
Correct.
This is the episode that people think of when they hear the words Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I think that's I 100% agree with you there. I think that's 100% accurate. Because if you do only think of the final episode and don't think of the countless hours that came before it that are a sweet, almost soap opera murder mystery, you're like, oh yeah, this show is weird as fuck.
Yeah, it's presented beautifully. The whole cinematic approach to it. The fact that this aired on primetime television is absurd.
Yeah.
The structure of it, or tasteful lack thereof, even is it's batshit. It's absolutely batshit.
The entire Red Room shit.
Yes.
When it's just 20 minutes of Cooper just with one reaction face of what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, tying together multiple threads from throughout the two seasons. Great character performance by Laura Palmer's actress, which I'll double dip on that sentiment when we get to Fire Walk with Me.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, the finale to season 2 is such a strong statement of this is what you all are in for. So buckle up and prepare yourself.
Yeah.
And it would have led to an extremely exciting third season at the time. But obviously the Maybe that season finale was a little too much for people at the time. I don't know a lot about the story surrounding why the show got pulled when it did. Or if it was just a case of Lynch losing interest because of backlash.
Everything leading up to the finale is why the show got pulled. Ratings were just abysmal. So like that entire chunk of Rough Patch, along with the rebuild, is why the show got canceled. The finale was Lynch's last ditch effort to try to save the series. And admittedly, after it got canceled, there was a big fan campaign and letter writing campaign to try to get the show a third season. But the damage of those episodes had been done, because once it was revealed who killed Laura Palmer, and once that entire storyline was wrapped up and the writers had nothing to do, people lost interest, because they're like, why am I going to sit down and watch a 45-minute episode where a good chunk of it is going to be James fucking off and doing nothing, or Nadine being a cheerleader, or Ben Horn being in the Civil War, or whatever, and all this other ridiculous shit.
And not having the knowledge that we have now as people watching it years later of be aware going into this chunk of the season that there's a dip in quality.
Yes, that's true. No, I feel like if I had been watching live, going from admittedly fantastic finale of the killer reveal to I don't even remember the episode that came next, but I would have been furious.
It was the funeral. Like, we haven't said who the killer is. I mean, I guess we should, because we can't really talk about Fire and Walk with Me without saying who the killer is.
Technically, we like immediately spoiled like all of the Snyder cut, and immediately spoiled
King
Kong and like King of Monsters and a bunch of other stuff, and then we're really tiptoeing around the Twin Peaks spoiler, despite the fact that
the show from years ago,
the show from like 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's Leland Palmer being possessed by spooky Black Lodge spirit Bob, who both performances are fantastic, because Ray Wise is a fucking delight.
Ray Wise is so good,
and Frank Silva's Bob is suitably fucking creepy and horrifying.
A nice, well-adjusted human being.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
quite.
it's the episode immediately following the Leland's death / Bob revealing himself to Cooper and Bob fucking off to the Black Lodge was Leland's funeral / wake. And that's also when we started to get introduced to the whole Cooper receiving his comeuppance for going to Canada to rescue Audrey Horne, and also the sting against Jacques Renault.
His investigation into the drug claims of trafficking.
And that I didn't mind quite too much, because we got Duchovny. And it was more Kyle MacLachlan and the sheriff.
Yeah, exactly. I liked the what's it called? Crew. The detective, the cops.
Yes.
I really like that. They all have a really nice dynamic with each other, I feel like.
Best boy Harry. The bromance between Harry Truman and Cooper is so strong.
But yeah, the everything else kind of like because essentially, despite the fact that this show, Twin Peaks is very much about Laura Palmer and her death, right? But like the big kind of like linchpin of that, so to speak, is her murderer, right? Even though it's not like the show is not about her murderer, and even when we find out who it is, it doesn't necessarily stop being interesting. But once you kind of once that connection was severed, once Bob and Leland were out of the picture, Laura is also out of the picture in a way.
Yep.
And therefore, everyone who had a connection to Laura, even a tenuous connection, kind of also gets severed from a point in the narrative.
Yep.
Right? Whereas the cops kind of still have a thing to do, because they were probably the least related to Laura, right?
Yeah.
They were police officers investigating a crime. despite the fact that we now, know, especially from Fire Walk with Me, that like Cooper was getting some sort of, he already had a connection to this stuff, and he's got his weird spiritual stuff going on.
Right.
Despite all that, ultimately in the narrative of the show, at that point, they're police officers. So like seeing them continue to police is still like, okay, well that's still compelling because who doesn't like police procedurals, right? Like that it's a staple of primetime TV since God knows when, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, when like it's like James is like, what do you do with James? What do you do with the boyfriend? Like, right? Like, what do you do?
What do you do with Bobby Briggs and Shelley?
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
Norma
like, what
Jennings.
do you do with Leo and that? Like, it's like, what do you do with half of these people?
Yeah, I still love Pete Martell, but it's like, what do you do with him? I love Big Ed, but it's like, what do you do with Big Ed?
Wait, was the yellow face in the bad episodes?
No, that started in the good
Let's talk
episode.
about Catherine Martell's yellow face.
Let's talk about Catherine Martell's yellow face. Spoilers.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Spoilers. So at the end of season 1, Catherine Martell's in a bit of a pickle because she's in the lumber mill and it's on fire, and Shelley Briggs is there, or not Shelley Briggs, Shelley Johnson, because Leo put Shelley in there, and then Hank lured Catherine there because Ben Horne is a piece of shit, wanted to kill Catherine. And then for a little bit, it seems like Catherine Martell is missing and or dead. And then
burned to death in the mill.
And then we have a mysterious Japanese man who kind of looks like somebody we know. That's not a joke about like the actor looking like somebody in the show. It's more that it looks like somebody me and Kat know in real life, so it's a little...
Oh yeah, that's right.
Saber, are you trying to say that all Asian people look alike?
No.
All Asian people look like Catherine Martell.
I'm just saying... I'm just saying
Catherine Martell is the Mandarin.
Yeah. I'm just saying that the makeup made
Oh my god, Lee. I took a soda. It's like... It literally came out my nose when you said that.
Excellent.
Perfect. I'm just saying that the makeup had a very strong resemblance to somebody that Kat and I know in real life.
That's right. Well, okay, because it was like long hair and a
super intense mustache, a super long mustache.
Yeah, and I was just like,
me,
ooh, that...
yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, oh, that looks like so and so, and then James was like, it's actually Catherine Martell in yellow face, and I was like, oh fuck, what? Like,
yeah, I had tried to warn you
bad.
about that without spoiling it beforehand. I was like, look, guys, all right, so Twin Peaks kind of does this one thing and later on that even for the time was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I'm just letting you guys know in advance.
Did they get backlash at the time?
I don't know. I would assume so. I would assume they got a little backlash. I don't know. It was 1991. Things were a lot different back then.
Everything flew in 91.
I mean, this was
that's very true.
This was years.
I ask because I'm actually curious about, like, I don't know if anybody, I have not looked into too much like recent Twin Peaks like criticism or anything. I have never seen, like, the first time I heard about it was you telling us when that character showed up that it was Catherine.
Yeah.
I was like, oh fuck.
There's a little bit of that. I mean, this was a couple years after, I can't even remember the actor's name, but there was this one movie where the premise of it was this white kid goes in blackface to get like a scholarship at a college. What? And it's this like comedy from the 80s. And it's just a white actor in blackface throughout the entire movie.
The spiritual predecessor to White Chicks. Got it.
Yeah.
There you go.
I can't remember. The
actually,
movie.
Will and I don't want to like rag on anyone who likes this movie if people like this movie. Will rented or Will bought Trading Places, the movie. Do you guys know of that one?
With Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, right?
Yeah, it's something else. I was like,
Trading Places is pretty good.
I hated it. I
haven't seen Trading Places.
We as soon as like, because blackface happens, and as soon as that happened, I was just like, no, we're turning this off.
I had to watch it in school.
Did you really?
Yep.
All right, so it was C. Thomas Howell from The Hitcher, and the movie was called Soul Man.
Oh, that's already a dicey title.
Yeah.
Well, here we go. Directed by Steve Miner and written by Carol L. Black. So Carol felt allowed to do this whole blackface.
God damn it.
I believe Steve Miner is a director of one of the Friday the 13th movies.
She's like, it's right in my name. I don't...
Yes, yeah. Oh, and he also directed Halloween H2O and Lake Placid and the Day of the Dead remake. Okay. Anyways, outside of that, there is some criticism about Twin Peaks, and for the yellow face, justifiably so. I also would recommend not looking into the Twin Peaks criticism, just in case it eventually potentially
spoils
season 3. Yeah. But yeah, that is one of the criticisms of Twin Peaks. Some of the criticism for Twin Peaks stems from some of the typical David Lynch criticism of just weird for the sake of being weird, or in some instances of people saying that he exploits his actresses, even though his actresses usually come out and go, "What the fuck are you talking about? I'm fine. I love the role. I'm glad I got to do this." And whatnot. I don't know. Like, I remember when season 3 came out, without getting into spoilers, there was some negative criticism about season 3 because it was like, oh, these horrible things are happening to these female characters. And I'm watching these episodes and I'm like, but equally horrible things are happening to the male characters too? Because I don't want to get into details because of spoilers, but like they pulled out one scene, but like the scene they're calling out involves 2 characters dying, one male, one female, and it's like, both characters died horribly in this scene. Why are you only focusing on one side of it? Sort of thing.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing that commonly gets kind of leveled at these things where it's if you're not okay with seeing something like that done one way, you shouldn't be okay with it the other way. You know, like if you're not good with like that happen to a woman, it shouldn't also happen to a man, and vice versa. So therefore, like you know, like you're allowed to, right? Like you are definitely allowed to say, hey, I don't like, personally, really don't like any sort of sexual assault on camera. That's a thing that makes me very, very uncomfortable in my media, right? I would not say like, oh, I'm fine I'm fine with Deliverance, but I'm not okay with I Spit on Your Grave, right? Like it's like no, I'm not okay with either of those things, right? Like both of them are horrible.
Both of them are horrible and uncomfortable, and
that being said, to segue, I think that I really enjoyed Fire Walk with Me, the movie. I think that was one of the harder scenes to watch.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes.
But ultimately, you know, you had given a little bit of a, you know, discussion on like how victims of incest had come out and like were grateful for that scene being shown because it was true to, you know, their experience and stuff like that. And I do appreciate that. And I think, to get into like my own personal philosophy for a minute, I think my big problem with that sort of thing on film is less so just purely depicting it, and more so depicting it solely as a threat against female characters.
Yeah.
Or filming it for titillation.
Yeah.
Over horror. Like if you're gonna show it, it needs to be horrifying. It can't be oh, this is hot or whatever. Like it has to like the scene in Twin Peaks is fucking horrifying.
And that's
what it's supposed to be.
I appreciate about like the way it's handled in Fire Walk with Me is it's fucking horrifying. And it's scary, and it's uncomfortable, and it's brutal, and it's not like, oh, we want a scene with tits. let's film a rape scene like a lot of shitty 80s or 70s exploitation handled it.
Yeah.
It's a generally uncomfortable moment.
Yeah,
even
it's a brutal, scarring experience.
Yeah, even a lot of modern media will depict a male villain as a, like willing to assault women. It just as almost like a shorthand for look how evil.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like you can portray how evil that person is without necessarily like you can't like don't use that as shorthand.
Yeah.
That's my line, I think, is I don't want a character shorthand to be like rapist equals evil, because then you're just automatically reducing like okay, so the scary thing, the reason I'm scared right now is because this guy, like the reason I'm scared for like a male character in a terrible like scary situation with a villain is for a myriad of reasons. Those same reasons can be applied to a scene with a male villain and a female hero without it being rape.
Yep.
Yes.
And
so
I think also too, that's like one of the things that even like the series touches upon, although we never really see too much of it outside of the Ben Horn being really creepy towards not knowing that like the girl was Audrey, but like we know, like they say in the first episode, Laura was sexually assaulted before she died. And it's like we know that this is going to be part of it. And then like even later on, when we find out that Leland went through the same thing, that Bob did the same thing to him.
Yes.
And it's just because like I even remember when during that reveal, when I had to point that out, it's like, no, Leland's actually being literal in this case. Of he was a victim of sexual assault by Bob. And just you and Lee both being like, oh God.
Yeah.
Well, and that's also one of those things that's like, because it is often generational, right? Like, I mean, I like, God, as a real world example, but like, watching the, oh my God, what is it called? I think it's the Globe, right? The one where it's them uncovering the Catholic Church sex abuse scandals.
Yeah.
That one was really hard for me because like of personal things in my life where like I, nothing terrible has ever happened to me, but like, I went to Catholic school all of my life, and there were definitely things that happened at that school that were like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like, but kind of seeing, because like I remember there's specifically a scene in that movie where they go interview one of the priests, and very specifically the guy like denies being it, like straight up he's like, oh, I didn't rape that guy because I know what it's like I was raped. And it's like, oh my God, like it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, it's a people like that aren't born, they're made, right? Like it's so yeah, it like I think Twin Peaks does a really good job of
it's
getting into that really dark shit without it being exploitative.
Yes.
Or
it's used as a tool by hacks to inject this very surface level amount of unease of like, oh, he's so evil, he sexually assaults people. It's like, okay. It's just such I hate to use the word like overplayed, because it makes it sound like a gimmick, and I'm not trying to underplay the act at all. But the number of films or books or anything that use sexual assault or rape as a part of the plot itself or as a character trait, the ones that do it well I can count on one hand.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling to think of enough to cover all those.
Yeah.
Like Twin Peaks did it very well with Bob. I think Berserk did it very well.
Silent Hill 2.
Really, I'd have to rack my brain to think of any others.
I think Silent Hill 2 is a good example, although we don't see it, we just know that it happened to Angela.
Yes.
And it's more abstract. Like I mean, like if you look at the abstract daddy enemy, it's like you can fucking tell if you close examine it that like, yeah, this is what it's supposed to represent. but it never plays it for titillation. It's there, and it's part of Angela's backstory, and she's clearly traumatized and broken because of it, and it's handled tastefully, I would say.
I'm also trying to think of movies that handle it really well, because like I
think Blue Velvet does.
So yeah, I think I would agree with you. Blue Velvet's probably another good one. So personally, like I'm a big fan of horror movies, right? So I do seek out a lot of horror, and therefore, like I'm not averse to being made uncomfortable by a movie. I'm not averse to having my buttons pushed or having my lines like towed, you know, a little bit. But so I have ended up watching a lot of, you know, I've seen I Spit on You and stuff like that. I've seen movies with graphic scenes of that, right? Yeah. I've seen plenty of very graphic movies in my time watching horror. And I would say the stuff that like, because that stuff like something like I Spit on Your Grave is like, that's the like, there was never any getting around that, right? Like the movie blurb itself is about that, right? Like if I'm picking up that movie, I know.
Or like Last House on the Left, at least the original anyway.
Yes.
Although the remake
kind of the remake is
it a little bit.
God, like no, the remake. I think I've complained about the remake before. It's literally shot like 100% for titillation, and it's just awful.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is that like it's simultaneously about how well you broach the subject matter. So like, you know, Twin Peaks, like obviously first episode they tell you that's what happened to her. You know, you kind of know going in already that like, hey, a girl was murdered, probably, you know, it's gonna get dark, right? Like you're not gonna watch a serial killer movie and not, you know, expect that hey buddy, you know, like especially if it's one where like the Hannibal Lecter films or something like that, right? Yeah. Like for the most part they kind of shy away from that sort of stuff, but it's very much still a part of how it is. And then to that note though, I think part of it is just like consent, right? Like it's like, you know, like if I'm seeking out a movie like a Serbian film, that's my prerogative, right? Like
yeah.
like I'm seeking that out. I'm knowing what I'm getting myself into, right? Mm-hmm. Like if it makes me too uncomfortable, I can turn it off and be like, well, that was too much for me. But it's not, you know, like I think there are certain movies that definitely have sprung it on me in a way where I was like the first Evil Dead was a really good example of that getting sprung on me suddenly like that was not okay with me. And it definitely left a really bad taste in my mouth about that movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so while Twin Peaks I think kind of towed that line a little bit, just because I don't think I expected to see it in a scene, you know, because I think they did in the, like, obviously the show is network TV, so they couldn't really.
Yeah, the show told you everything you needed to know without seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. But the movie, you see it, and it's, you know, but I didn't hate it as much as I thought I might have, because that is a thing that usually in most cases if something springs that kind of scene on me, I would be like, okay, I'm done.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've done that before with movies where I've just been like, all right, it's over.
Yeah. At least in Twin Peaks' case, like especially if you've seen the series, you know that this is something that happens to Laura Palmer. You know, terrible, terrible, terrible shit happens to her character. Mm-hmm. You might not necessarily expect to see it in the movie, but you do know that something terrible is going to happen to her. And at least to Lynch's credit, I think he handled it mostly tastefully and handled it in a very horrific manner, as opposed to, say, like I've only seen clips of it. Death Wish 3 which is mostly this action schlock movie, right?
You don't, none of the Death Wishes handle that with any sort of
none of them. But specifically, I'm calling out because I heard about it through Red Letter Media when they did their Death Wish 3 Best of the Worst thing, where it's this schlocky, fun action movie of just Charles Bronson brutalizing and murdering people. And there's a sequence in it where a female character is sexually assaulted because it's a canon movie or whatever. And like the behind the scenes footage from what Jay Bauman was saying, based on the movie, the documentary about canon films, where the actress was called and requested a blanket, for in between shots. And the director said, "I can't light the scene properly unless I see your tits." And it's like, that's that sort of thing versus, where it's pure exploitation, and it's just like,
that's 100% as I have, I have my feelings about all that stuff, and I like it was definitely a moment for me where my reaction to that scene for a while, because I was just kind of like, I didn't hate that as much as I've hated other scenes like that, or other shows or movies that do that kind of thing. So what was it about this that did it differently? Like, because I personally, I don't think I'm one to like give the benefit of the doubt to something I like more than something like I don't like.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I like, obviously I've enjoyed Twin Peaks. But like, I like, God, I'm trying to think of another example. I think, the Peter Jackson one with the fish guy.
Shape of Water.
Yeah, that was like that was the first one where I was just like, that's one of the movies where I turned it off after one of the like really. And again, that's a movie that most normally I would be like, hey, I'm all for this. Michael Shannon chewing the scenery. Oh wait, he's absolutely the worst in that movie. So yeah, but yeah, this was one where I didn't hate it, and I was surprised.
I think it's because the act itself wasn't glorified in any way, and the focus on Laura shows the psychological damage that the act causes.
You know what? Lee, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. It focused on her, and that was the it focused on her, and it didn't focus on the act. It focused on her, like on the reveal of like her figuring it out.
Her realizing it's her father.
Her realizing it's
this.
her dad. Yeah. And then I was like that. That's I think the
aftermath too.
It's because the power trip that a lot of people generate from the act of sexual assault comes from taking power away from the victim. And what David Lynch was able to do was to keep power in the hands of the victim.
Yeah, that's true.
Laura realizing that and moving forward was taking her life back.
Absolutely, bravo to him for that. Then,
and her the reaction in the aftermath the next day, where her dad, unaware of what happened because it was Bob, is like, hey sweetie, how you doing? And just her reaction of stay away from me, sort of thing, where it's hammering home like, no, this is horrible. This was not for the audience's titillation. This is a horrible act that should be seen as horrifying.
And of course, that's not to say that like, my metric for these things is not the be all end all for everyone, right? Like there are people who are not bothered by this sort of thing. There are people who watch certain scenes of characters, like being portrayed as kind of like threatening in a sexual way as not that, and don't find it bothersome as I do. There are people who like, are unfazed by. I don't know if there's anybody who's by that sort of scene. But there are people who cannot watch those scenes for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And that is also fine. Like me saying it didn't bother me is not me like disparaging anyone who is bothered.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I just want to get that out there because I'm a person who takes that shit very, very seriously, and I don't want people to. I don't want people to be so uncomfortable. You know, like I make myself uncomfortable for a lot of different reasons for horror. I like horror movies, right?
Yeah.
But with that, I think does come kind of like a bit of a desensitization to some things and a bit of a heightened sensitivity to other things. I
think this ties to some of the stuff that we've discussed off podcast, off Twitch or whatever, where everybody has different tastes, everybody has different levels of what they can and cannot accept, or anything like that. Like even me saying I think Silent Hill 2 handled it tastefully, I'm sure there's at least
people who disagree with you,
who would disagree with me. I'm sure they're like, I am generally of the mindset that I don't think really any topic should be off limits, but I am of the mindset that an individual writer should know their own strengths and weaknesses and whether or not they have the talent to be able to handle that. And even then, like, just because they do have the talent, there's still going to be people who go like, I don't think this subject should be ever covered, or I don't think it was handled well. Like even like, so, not to get off topic and not to like draw away from the severity of it, but like one of the more common things that pops up is like the idea of politics in video games. And like that's one of those things where it's like games have always had, at least some games have always had some sort of political edge to them. And I think it's just a matter of people who don't want that are more like, I don't think it was handled well. And then you have other people who go like, oh, politics absolutely should be covered in video games. And like, yeah, they should. But like everybody has different layers of, or different levels of what they think is acceptable or an opinion on if it was handled well or not. Like, I think politics are handled well enough in Metal Gear Solid 1, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who go like, Kojima's a fucking hack fraud who can't handle political stuff well in the slightest. I think Spec Ops The Line handles shit pretty fucking well, but I know there are people who disagree with me on that. And similarly, like The Last of Us Part 2, there's people who like, I don't want politics in video games, and it's like there's plenty of people who go like, I think it handled it really well.
Yeah.
Or any topic.
And also that I feel like is in terms of The Last of Us, I felt like that was a little disingenuous just because I think sometimes the argument is disingenuous in general, but like certainly in The Last of Us, like it's not political to include gay people in your media. It's not. And that's like, you know, like sometimes that's they're what they're trying to say is like, I didn't like the preachy stuff, but in that case, I feel like it was in the case of especially The Last of Us Part 2, I feel like it was more just
it's,
but you know, people are allowed to have their, like, you know, a different opinion and dislike. People are allowed to dislike that game for a variety of reasons. But I don't think that the more left-leaning ideology that comes through and how a lot of everything in that game is presented is a problem about the game, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It's one of those things where it's just like, because I mean, like,
if you have a problem with that, then you need to also have a problem with the like extremely jingoistic Call of Duty campaigns, right? Yep. Which, like, I don't necessarily think anybody has a problem with those, right? Like,
there's some who do. I mean, like, there was this, there was or even the multiplayer, like the whole, there were a lot of people who were getting up in arms about the most recent Modern Warfare because one of the kill streaks was white phosphorus, and people were super up in arms about, you're rewarding war crimes for getting X amount of kills in a row. And I'm like, it's a multiplayer game. I'm not trying to necessarily think about that sort of thing. I mean, maybe it should, but also this is the same franchise that in Modern Warfare 2 had a tactical nuke as a kill streak. And
yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's, to an extent, that's a little bit silly because it's a multiplayer game where, of course, you're rewarded for kill. Your reward is for killing people.
Yeah.
Like already you're doing something objectively horrible to get these rewards, and then they reward stuff to kill more people in more horrible ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess I don't know. Yeah, because I mean, like if you know anything about, you know, the aftermath of being nuked, like you would know that it's horrible. I read a lot of books on like the you know, eyewitness accounts of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it's like it's nightmare fuel. It's absolutely nightmare fuel.
Yep.
Like, you know, this is so yeah. If you're gonna be up in arms for Wi-Fi, maybe ages ago about nuking, but you're not, because
All right, so to get a little bit back on.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It was part of the topic. It tied into shit. Like, so, like, overall thoughts on Fire Walk with Me. Since we're kind of talking about it with the horrible shit, but like, because I told you guys that it had a very polarizing reception when it came out.
Yeah, actually, I don't think you got too into that, so I'd be interested to know, like, what was polarizing about it. Just because it was a prequel and it was far more tonally closer to a David Lynch film than what Twin Peaks was, because there's some humor in Fire Walk with Me. Like, I think we can agree, like the stuff with Chester Desmond at the start with his FBI stuff and him kind of being asshole Cooper, and Gordon Cole yelling and stuff. You know, there's some humor there, but like a lot of people kind of went into Fire Walk with Me expecting Twin Peaks the movie, which is a fair. I'd say that's fair because it's based on Twin Peaks. Yeah. So they're maybe expecting cherry pie and coffee and quirky characters, and a lot of that is there in the deleted scenes, but what they got was a really, really dark and sad and fucked up movie. Like, even my dad, what you're saying is release the Lynch cut.
Yes. Release the 4-hour Lynch cut. Like, I was talking to my dad about it the other day, because I mentioned that I showed you guys Twin Peaks, so I finally got to experience the joy of watching Twin Peaks with somebody who'd never seen Twin Peaks. And I mentioned that we watched Fire Walk with Me, and he goes, you know, when I saw that film in theaters when it came out, I fucking hated it. I had it on Laserdisc still, because I like to collect that sort of thing, but I fucking hated it. And I ended up going to... He was like, I went to some screening where it was a double feature of Fire Walk with Me and Citizen Kane. And the reason why it was because apparently, like, the people who were doing the double feature thing were like, there's some Lynchian type stuff in Citizen Kane. I'm like, okay, sure. All right, you know, whatever.
That's a weird one.
And even he was like, okay, sure, fine, whatever. And he was mostly there for Citizen Kane because he didn't like Fire Walk with Me. And part of the reason why he didn't like it because it was just so bleak and sad and depressing and everything like that. And when he got there, he found out that they were doing Fire Walk with Me first. So he was like, fuck, all right, fine. I'm already here. I might as well just sit through Fire Walk with Me again. And upon rewatch, he wound up liking it a hell of a lot more than he did 20 some odd years ago when he first saw it. Because I think a lot of that stems from just when you go from the series to the movie, sure, some of the weirdness is still there, and there's a little bit of the quirky stuff still there, but it is very tonally different from the show in a lot of respects. It's much darker and much colder, and even with you knowing what is going to happen at the end, I don't necessarily expect people to imagine that it is just going to be an hour and a half plus of Laura Palmer's suffering, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's a large part of it. That, and just some people just thought David Lynch was up his own ass, because David Lynch has always kind of had there's only really a handful of movies that I've noticed that have had a solid enough critical reception David Lynch. A lot of his films are kind of got a mixed reception. Like even Blue Velvet, I think for a while, like at least when it first came out, which I like Blue Velvet. I haven't seen Blue Velvet in a long time, but I liked it when I saw it. I reading some retrospective reviews, people fucking hated that movie. It's like only I think only The Elephant Man and A Straight Story are like the only two Lynch films I've heard of that have had a universally positive reception when they came out.
Interesting.
Oh, Jinxley.
Yeah, it's like you look at like a lot of Lynch's criticisms are with his films are like glorifying violence and glorifying sexual assault, and it's like I wouldn't say that anything in Fire Walk with Me or Blue Velvet glorified that at all.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think he just to argue with that, I think it's more of a presenting it in a very raw, disturbing way.
Yeah.
Where like if you want to talk like glorifying violence, I think, there's plenty of movies that quote unquote do that.
Yeah.
I think it's just, that kind of stuff is fun to see. We're very animalistic and
yeah, like when
seeing feats of crazy human nonsense is kind of like without the suffering is kind of bread and butter, right?
Yeah, like when the dude gets shot in the head in Fire Walk with Me, the famous Bobby killed a guy scene, that's horrifying because like it's a gigantic graphic fucking hole in the back of the dude's head, and it's unexpected and it's sudden and it's brief, and it's like I would not say that that's glorifying violence at all. Like I love Die Hard, but that movie definitely glorifies violence. It glorifies being a badass and everything like that.
Yeah.
This is more.
Or like any Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
Like, like he loves violence.
He loves violence.
That's the guy you'd be like, oh, like he's horribly, showing how fun violence is. It's like, yeah, he likes it.
Yeah.
That's what he likes doing. He's a good writer. He writes
fun violence.
Crazy shit. Yeah.
But yeah, like I think from what I've seen anyway, like a lot of it stemmed from that, just the typical mixed reaction Lynch gets, how violent and off-putting the movie is, how sad it is, and how different it was from Twin Peaks. Like, just tonally or whatever. Like
I can see that.
At least for me, like, you were out of the room when we were watching it, but, like, Lee and I were kind of discussing it. We're, like, a bit at the halfway point. And, like, one of my things about it is like I definitely didn't like it as much when I first saw it, because again I think I had that going from Twin Peaks to going from Fire Walk with Me and being disappointed that the quirky humor was not there. But like looking at it objectively, even though I like the movie, I do feel the movie it doesn't quite have a narrative through line, so to speak, and it feels like Laura Palmer's life is a bit more episodic to an extent, where it's like this scene happens, and then this scene happens, and then this scene happens, and it's like, that's fine, it's like we're examining her life, but like, and I think Sheryl Lee gives an amazing fucking performance in that movie, but it does leave something a bit narratively lacking to an extent. I still like the film a lot, just it didn't quite have a strong enough through line, at least for me, anyway. But although I do love the movie. Especially in hindsight, knowing that with season 3 being a thing, and not having to go like, this is the last thing of Twin Peaks I will ever get to fucking witness. And it is a fucking prequel that does not answer anything.
I think for me, I think I mentioned this after we finished the movie. I think in some regards, I actually enjoyed the movie better than the show. And I think a big part of it is just personal preference, that I'm not huge into soap operas. I hate love triangles in cinema, and there's a lot of love triangles in Twin Peaks.
Yeah, there are. Jesus fuck.
And so yeah, what I usually go for is much more of the dark, you know, like tonally dark, depressing kind of stuff. So obviously like Fire Walk with Me scratches that itch a little more. But on top of that, also, I think the opening of Twin Peaks of Laura Palmer dead and wrapped in plastic is such a strong opening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then to actually see her as a living, breathing character, was such. It was so great for me. I was like, this is like we got to know her a little bit.
Yeah,
it puts the entire first season of the show into a different light.
Exactly, and I liked that a lot. I liked seeing her as a person and seeing, like not just seeing her in the abstraction of all the things she did, all the people's lives she touched, and just but her being dead the whole time. Seeing her as a person and seeing, especially in those last very traumatic like week of her life, was really cool, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm also I like Lynch's movies, so I will admit I'm a little biased, I think, in that regard too. That I think his movies are phenomenal.
That's one of the things that Jay and Josh point out in the Fire Walk with Me review. I don't know if you have it.
Oh,
if you've watched it yet.
I have not watched any of their Twin Peaks stuff yet because I was afraid they would reference return stuff. So I was kind of like, I'll hold off on all of that.
Well, the good news is they did their Fire Walk with Me video like a week before Return aired, and they refused to even comment on what their speculations for Return were because they didn't want to speculate on it. But they both kind of came to the agreement that they felt that David Lynch kind of fell in love with the character of Laura Palmer, and that everybody in Twin Peaks loved Laura Palmer, and Lynch wanted to find out why. And that's why Fire Walk with Me is a thing. That's
great.
Yeah. And I'd agree with that sentiment because I think, like, again, she's such an impactful character to the series, even though she is dead from second one.
Mm-hmm.
But why did she affect, like, literally everybody in fucking town? And that's what Fire Walk with Me kind of touches upon.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, Lee, your thoughts?
Yeah.
Overall, yeah, the movie itself can feel very disjointed. My exact comment when we were talking was it felt like a supercut of all the scenes from a character in a season of a show.
I can really see that.
Yeah.
But it does a very good job of showing everything that we didn't know we were missing out on in the first season.
Yeah.
When the characters that Cooper interacts with are reminiscing about their best times with Laura and how much she meant to the community, it paints a beautiful picture of who this character is. And then to be able to see that play out in Fire Walk with Me was really nice without throwing a nice coat of paint over all the hardships and horrors that she had to live with. I can see why Lynch completely fell for the character because she's once Fire Walk with Me is incorporated into the mythos, Laura Palmer becomes one of the strongest characters in the story. And the added assistance from being able to do it as a film and in that cinematic style as opposed to the episodic television style it's just what was needed. I don't feel like it would have translated as strongly in the soap opera sort of style.
Mm-hmm.
So as upset as people were, I think that was just because of the loose cliffhanger threads from the end of the second season. I think that when season 2 ended, if there were if there were able to be 2 films, and if there was one that extended the story of Cooper and wrapped up everything, and then another one which was Fire Walk with Me and getting the prequel, I think people would look back on Fire Walk with Me a lot more fondly because it wasn't expected to be the conclusion to the Twin Peaks storyline.
Yeah.
I think people gave it a hard time back in the day because it just wasn't what they happened to be looking for.
Yeah.
So me being able to watch it now, knowing that there is a third season that continues the story, and being able to look at Fire Walk with Me without that judgment, without that bias, I think it was a very good movie. Yeah, some pacing issues, but it's all nitpicking really when you just consider the weight of the performance that drives it.
Yeah.
And I will fully admit that I know I kind of disparaged her performance early in the movie, because I felt like she was doing a little bit too much, a little over dramatic mouth wiggling at different moments. But as the film went on, her performance, like, she nailed it absolutely.
Yeah.
Gobble gobble gobble.
Gobble gobble was like the worst for me, and then it steadily improved to like brilliance by the end, where I was like, okay, like,
yeah, she and Ray Wise carry that fucking movie.
mm-hmm.
Some of the shit. Like,
I was actually kind of surprised. I expected to see more of him because of the, basically like, oh, we know he's the killer, right? I expected them to kind of like focus a little more on him, and I really like that they didn't. I like that he wasn't in that movie that much.
Yeah.
Really, like, it was Laura's story, and goddamn, I'm so glad for it.
It's Laura's story. We got to see Leland post-murder. We got to know Leland a bit. We got to know the Bob position a bit in the series. The only character that we didn't know anything about was the lumberjack in the weird scene, in the David Bowie scene. No. It's Laura Palmer and why and how and why everybody gave a shit, and I'd say that she was fucking fearless, because some of the scenes that she had to do were fucking just gut-wrenching and hard and intense, and she fucking screams like, whoa, dude. Like, even in that finale, you guys were so uncomfortable when it was that close-up of just her screaming, and it's
such
just
a good shot.
Yeah.
And I mean, and her screams are fantastic.
Yeah, it's insane. It's so, I love it. I love it.
Overall, I think Fire Walk with Me was a great way to wrap up that first phase of our foray into Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to see what the third season's going to hold.
Me too. Lee, I'm so, because I know you said you've seen Old Cooper. I think I've also only seen Old Cooper.
Yeah, I've successfully dodged what all of the actors and actresses look like.
I'm so glad.
I have too. I'm so excited for us to be like, oh, it's that person.
Like, I know what they look like, because, like, as you guys know, I've seen a little bit of season 3. I was watching it at the time, week by week, when it came out, but then Lost Legacy Crunch overtook, and I was like, I'll get back to this eventually, and I never got around to finishing it. So I'm excited to finish season 3. I've only seen, like, the first 8 episodes or so.
I want to see how adorable Lucy still is. Yeah. I want to see how awesome interdimensional sojourner of the metaphysical realm Hawk looks. I'm ready.
I'm very happy that neither of you, because you both have sent me Twin Peaks gifts, and I'm so glad that you haven't seen anything besides Old Cooper via gift wise, like, because there's some season 3 gifts. And
I feel like if I have seen season 3 gifts, I didn't realize who it was.
That's fine. That's perfect.
Yeah.
You guys are going to be in...
Contextually, I have nothing to
Yeah.
Plan myself that way.
You guys are definitely going to be in for a big shock, because even though season 3, without going into details, is tonally closer to, like, Fire Walk with Me than the original show, it still is its own thing, and that's all I'm gonna say, is that it's its own fucking beast. There's a reason why Red Letter Media's review of season 3 is a 2-parter, and for part 2, for part 1 they're only going with coffee, and for part 2 they cracked open the beer and bourbon because good God. Yeah, I'm excited for you guys to see the characters who did get to return, either because they were asked to be brought back and they came back, or because they're still alive since, as I told you guys, sadly, although again it makes sense since a lot of the actors were old when they filmed the original Twin Peaks, but some of the actors are sadly no longer with us. So no David Bowie, no Jack Nance as Pete Martell, so on and so forth. Just and especially since it's going to be a little somber too, since I think I mentioned like almost every episode of Twin Peaks season 3 is dedicated to a different member of the cast and crew, since even while filming Twin Peaks season 3 and as it was airing, different members of the cast passed away. Like Miguel Ferrer's Albert, he passed away I think shortly before season 3 aired. Donna's dad, who's actually the real life father of one of the co-creators, Mark Frost, he passed away shortly before the series aired. Harry Dean Stanton passed away like 2 weeks after the finale premiered. Peggy Lipton passed away. She played Norma. She passed away like a year or two ago. There's a lot of death surrounding season 3, which makes it, and of course the Log Lady, who I've mentioned, that is going to be, the Log Lady is going to be a tough watch for you guys for sure. But again, like I do want to say kudos to we'll touch upon it after you guys watch it and when we get there, but like kudos to her for being fearless and brave despite knowing that she was dying and willing to put herself on screen, because like she was in Eraserhead. She helped out on Eraserhead. She and David Lynch go way fucking back, and she wanted to see this through to the end. Whether or not season 3 is the end of Twin Peaks, nobody fucking knows, except for maybe Lynch one day. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting experience when we get there on Tuesday. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what season 3 holds in store. Just in terms of I am a sucker for like revisiting an older kind of like revisiting something at a later time kind of thing, seeing kind of what falls out from here kind of thing. And also just like I'm like, yeah, I have no idea what the story is about, but I'm like fully invested already. Like,
that's one of the plus sides about even when season 3 was about to premiere, David Lynch kept the plot completely under wraps, so literally nobody knew what the fuck was going to happen.
That's the way to do it.
None of the promos, none of the trailers gave fucking anything away at all, and it was kind of glorious. Just the fact that like people were able to go into this unspoiled, and at least for me, because we've in Red Letter Media touched upon this as well, but I completely agree. We've seen a lot of like franchise revivals. And many instances, it kind of feels like almost a cash grab sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas this comes from a genuine passion of David Lynch wanting to revisit these characters. Like, this would not exist unless David Lynch wanted to do it. Like, if David Lynch didn't want to do it, season 3 wouldn't be a thing. And nobody was pressuring him to make it. It was just, he was like, hey, I want to do this. And Showtime's like, fuck yeah, let's do it. Though I do think you guys are going to have one one reaction that's similar to your reaction from season 1 and 2, and that is, how the fuck did this air on TV?
Okay. I hope it's not the reaction to Catherine Martell.
No.
Okay, all right.
No. I'm more talking about, you know how, like, with the season finale where you're like, how the fuck did this air on TV?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Even now, when this aired in 2017, and you see some of the shit that this does, how the fuck did this air on TV? The fact that Showtime greenlit it is just... I think some critics called it, it's not quite film and it's not quite television. It's some weird, yeah. It's its own thing. It's its own David Lynch beast. And even then, it's often seen less as a television series and just more as one 18-hour movie cut into parts.
Interesting.
So that'll be interesting for us to experience. So I guess we should probably wrap it up because we're at the 3-hour mark.
Yeah, we should.
So verdicts, Justice League we're happy it exists, but we didn't like it. We love Godzilla vs. Kong.
Yep.
And we love Twin Peaks, even though it does have some rough shit to it. And fuck James Hurley.
Fuck James Hurley.
Fuck him, fuck Donna.
Yeah. I think the next time we do this, it'll be about Mortal Kombat and the new movie and discussing the old movie. And I told Lee that I want us to do a watch party of Annihilation, and Lee's not happy about that.
Oh.
I'm gonna conveniently be in a fire that day. I'm sorry.
We gotta do it, man. We gotta do it. Look, we're gonna riff it, and it'll be fine. All right. I know I know you won't have any booze on you, but it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Annihilation will make me start drinking again.
Oh
no. All right. All right. So I guess good night, everybody. I don't know how podcasts typically end.
Lee, help us out.
Yeah. Stand aside, amateur. All right. So that was the maiden voyage of what is tentatively called the Gooncast. We're gonna figure this out as we go along. Reporting in for Saber 0307 on Twitch. Come check out our streams, usually about 5 days a week with a little bit of shifting around when necessary. We've got the cat attack cat, however you want to do it, reporting in. And I'm the Valley Jester. You can check out my shameless plug at www.leealdercreative.com, where I have not updated anything in about 5 months.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, it's great. Yours is like one of the first links I put in the YouTube videos, and nothing has happened.
So, yeah, you can look forward to more of our brand of shenanigans over on Saber's channel. Once again, Saber0307 at Twitch, where we frequently deal with the plummeting dark depths of sadness that is Corpse Party.
And whacking ghosts
the
and
wacky highs and lows of Drakengard. And
Beautiful Boyfriend and Phasmo and occasionally Sherlock and other goofy ass shit.
But yeah, your channel legacy, Corpse Party, Drakengard, and maybe Resident Evil.
Yeah, I do a lot of Resident Evil, but it's let's be real. Nobody's gonna remember me for Resident Evil. It's all gonna be Drakengard and Corpse Party. The only difference between the two.
Maybe Illbleed?
Illbleed. Yeah, Illbleed. The only difference between the three...
Because of us, Illbleed 2 will one day happen.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and also Ring Terror's Rum. The only difference between the four of those is I like playing Drakengard and Ring and Illbleed, even though they're all kind of objectively terrible. I don't like playing Corpse Party.
I like how we were like, all right, let's sign out, and then we spent another...
Yeah.
Yeah, let's sign this thing out. Oh, Jesus, we got James started on Corpse Party. Here we go.
Corpse Party will be its own episode, maybe.
Oh, man, we should do a Corpse Party post-mortem.
We should. We'll get Niku in here and just yell at him for 3 hours.
Just yell at Niku for 3 hours,
and just be like, why?
Yep.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night, folks. Thanks for tuning in.